Hello everyone, this is Fanfic Audiobook. Here you find original fan made audio stories.
Vampires don't drink blood. What kind of cultural invasion is this? Part 1. When Zod woke up, he was lying in a coffin. Outside the coffin, he could hear low roars and the panicked voices of several people. Hold him down. Use the chains. Hold on a little longer. Just a little longer. Listening to the sounds outside, Zod, inside the coffin, felt bewildered. Wasn't he just being pressured by his boss to rush a major game update? How is it that the moment he opened his eyes, it felt like the project team had disbanded and the whole crew had been buried? This project crashed way too thoroughly, didn't it? And what were those sounds outside? Subconsciously pushing open the coffin lid, Zod sat up and saw a chaotic scene. The first thing that caught his eye appeared to be a damp, dilapidated underground hall. On the surrounding benches or stone pillars, there were several people tightly bound with iron chains, still struggling incessantly. There were also a few others frantically using chains to reinforce the bindings, ensuring these people wouldn't break free. The moment he saw this chaotic scene, fragments of strange memories began to flood into Zod's mind. Vampire, church, survival, hunger, and blood and worship. At the same time, his body's instincts were mixed with a craving for blood. Wait, did he transmigrate? And it seemed he had turned into a vampire. As for those people who were either struggling crazily or panicking, they were also vampires, members of his clan. The overlapping memories allowed Zod to instantly recognize these clansmen. Among them were two female vampires, one older and one younger. They were his most direct descendants, Angie and Triss. He saw the slightly older female vampire, Angie, struggle to restrain the last crazed vampire, then sit on the ground with an exhausted expression to take a short break. Angie. Zod subconsciously called out to the exhausted Angie, which immediately drew the attention of Angie and the younger Triss beside her, who both looked up. Grand Duke of Blood. Thank goodness you're awake. Both of them immediately revealed looks of surprise and joy. After ensuring the crazed vampires were all restrained, they quickly ran over to Zod. Grand Duke of Blood, after you finished suppressing those few clansmen, you went straight into the coffin. We almost thought you weren't going to make it either. Angie and Triss's eyes were slightly red. Zod tried his best to stay calm, looking at the bound, crazed vampire clansman, and asked in a deep voice, "What is the situation now?" At this moment, memories were still constantly overlapping, and Zod wasn't yet clear about what had happened. As you can see, they drank the blood of humans who had consumed analgesic concoctions. Angie's voice was very low. Too weak to think about much, she answered honestly. Even though you had clearly forbidden them from drinking that unclean blood, they couldn't resist their extreme hunger and ended up running to the slums to buy the cheap blood of people who had consumed analgesic concoctions. The chains can only restrain them temporarily, but they can't suppress the effects of the toxic blood. If this drags on, they will become hungrier and crazier. In 3 days at most, the first batch you suppressed will likely lose their minds completely. With Angie's explanation, the memories began to overlap rapidly, and scene after scene gradually became clear. Zod also understood his current situation. Zod was not surprised by the transmigration, in fact, he had been prepared for it. As someone who often read web novels and watched isekai anime, he had fantasized more than once about what he would do if he transmigrated. But turning into a vampire was really a bit beyond his expectations. The original owner of the body was named Zolid Nuland. He was a Grand Duke of Blood of the vampire race. And he was the last known line of the vampire race in this world. Of course, while he was called a Grand Duke of Blood, it was really just a title now. As for the current state of affairs, the root cause stemmed from the rise of other factions over the past millennium, while the vampires had made no progress. Once a glorious race, they were all that remained after being hunted down by the newly emerged church and vampire hunter factions. If it weren't for the fact that the Grand Duke of Blood, Zolid, still had some connections and had guaranteed they would no longer commit evil deeds at will or hunt other living beings for blood, they might have been exterminated long ago. But now it seemed that extermination was already imminent. Given that they couldn't proselytize, perform blood sacrifices, or hunt for blood, combined with being ostracized by mainstream society, the decline of the vampires was inevitable. The original owner had held on until the end, not that he hadn't thought of ways to solve it. He used his last strength to suppress the first batch of crazed clansmen, but suffered backlash, so he locked himself in the coffin, trying to sleep through the backlash of the blood poison. But by the time the backlash had basically faded, the original owner had completely breathed his last due to exhaustion. And then Zod came in to take over the account. Having understood the whole story, Zod fell silent for a few seconds, inwardly lamenting that he had likely drawn the worst possible starting hand. The clan was on the verge of extinction, and the remaining members were all going crazy because they had drunk the blood of a bunch of addicts. And if he let these clansmen go crazy and die one by one, it might attract the attention of the church, who would seize the opportunity to carry out a final purge of the vampire race on the grounds that they had gone mad. So he had to do something now. But what should he do? Zod began to think rapidly, his gaze subconsciously wandering over these clansmen. Although these vampires now looked like unlucky corporate slaves drained by papers, bosses, and night shifts, their appearances were impeccable, and he, the Grand Duke of Blood, was even more so. Appearance. Worship. Zod's thoughts began to become clear. Angie, gaining worship can temporarily suppress the madness from drinking tainted blood, right? If the worship is strong enough, we won't even need to drink blood anymore. Angie was stunned, then asked nervously, worship. Grand Duke of Blood, do you want to rebuild the blood sacrifices, or conduct bloodthirsty proselytizing? Doing so would indeed gain the power of worship and suppress the clansmen's madness, but if we do that, I'm afraid the church's holy flames would be waiting for us the moment we step outside. I never said anything about blood sacrifices, nor did I say anything about bloodthirsty proselytizing, and we don't have believers or enough offerings to use anyway. Then, I'm talking about ourselves. Zod looked at these vampires, a different kind of brilliance appearing in his eyes. In Zod's eyes, the vampires before him were gloomy, beautiful, and mysterious. In this world, they were monsters. But in Zod's eyes, weren't these just a group of character assets that hadn't been packaged yet? They were even the type that came with a built-in celebrity idol buff. Zod was silent for 2 seconds. I think we can completely change our mindset. Worship doesn't necessarily require those old methods from the past. As he said this, Zod also began to realize that what was truly blocked for vampires wasn't the prohibition of worship itself. What was blocked was just the way vampires had obtained worship in the past. Blood sacrifices, proselytizing, mental induction, raising believers. In the new era, these things would naturally be burned to ashes by the church. But what if someone buys a ticket to see you, follows you to discuss you, imitates you, or even gets into a heated argument with others over you? The vampires are the best actors. The games the vampires make are the best. The vampires' songs are the best. It could even be. Our vampire brother would never have a scandal. Situations like this should count as worship. Immediately, various thoughts and familiar cultural works surfaced in his mind. Vampire Hunter, Blade, Twilight, Castlevania. If his plan could succeed, then vampires might embark on a completely different path. Zod looked at the still bewildered Angie. Take you, for example, Angie. You're pretty enough, your figure is amazing, your temperament is quite unique, and you're naturally good at deceiving people and acting. Angie was confused. These are our specialties, but they were previously used for hunting or blood sacrifices. Zod waved his hand and said, I know, but that was in the past. In the past, we used all these specialties for proselytizing, induction, blood sacrifices, and that whole old era routine. Now that they had been pushed to this point, this was the only advantage left to gamble with, especially since there seemed to be no other choice. He paused, his tone growing heavier. But now, we can use these specialties to launch a cultural invasion of the entire world. Culture. Triss tilted her delicate, pale face upward and asked earnestly, Lord, is that something you can drink? Of course not, Triss. Zod raised his hand and patted her head. But we have no other choice now. Our kin have already become like this, and our past means of survival are heavily restricted. We can only seek a new way to survive. But Lord, is this really okay? Angel understood Zod's description. Performances and shows, isn't this just like stage plays in a theater or juggling in a circus? But can this kind of thing earn worship? Oh, perhaps a little, but the scale of such worship probably wouldn't be very large. It's not as if vampires haven't been stage actors in the past, yet there was no sign that they could completely stop relying on blood. Zod countered, how will we know if we don't try? Besides, you probably can't think of any other way to survive right now, can you? Angel was silent. Indeed, there were no better options. The current madness of their kin couldn't be cured by small amounts of pure plasma alone, but they lacked the funds for large quantities. It seemed they really had to follow the Lord's idea and pursue this so-called cultural invasion. Lord, where do you intend to start? Let's start by filming a magic film. Zod had considered starting with something like video games or perhaps card games. However, it was unclear if this world even had binary, so the game development methods from his past life likely wouldn't work here. As for entertainment forms like card games, they also required startup capital. On the other hand, for a magic film, only a filming device and a playback device were needed. Coincidentally, in the original owner's memories, there really was such a filming device called a recording crystal, which seemed to be something that had become popular due to industrial development in this world in recent years. Isn't this just a camera in this world? Then, he just needed to find the workshop that produced this item and find a way to persuade them to provide a set of equipment for filming and screening first. Zod had already thought of a persuasive argument for this. Even if this worship didn't truly work, Zod was confident he could use this to extract a large amount of funds. The efficiency might be a bit slower, and perhaps some kin would inevitably die, but there was no better way. Magic film. Angel repeated the words one by one, seemingly trying to digest the meaning of the term. There's no time to lose. Let's act now. You few stay here to watch the crazed kin and ensure they don't break free from their restraints. Then, Angel and Triss, you two come with me. Zod didn't waste any words and immediately led Angel and Triss out of the hall. Now they were in a race against time and couldn't afford to waste a single moment. Regardless of whether this idea worked, only by going out and testing it could he get the answer he wanted. Golden Goblet Street, Lane 33. A factory was located here. The roar of machinery could still be heard inside the factory building, with workers sparsely performing their tasks. It was evident that this place hadn't been doing well recently, as several production lines were empty. In the factory office, Lord Carter was staring at the boxes of goods in front of him, feeling troubled. Recording crystals. A novelty that had been all the rage last year, but this year, no one wanted to see them anymore. When this item first came out, the noble circles had pursued it fiercely, all saying it was a new symbol of high society. Lord Carter had also felt that he had caught the trend, gone all in, and even modified his production lines, waiting to make a big profit from it. As a result, just after modifying the production lines and conducting mass production, the trend passed, and it became something the nobles despised. Thus, it quickly turned from a trendy novelty into a white elephant. If he sold it now, it would be like selling it for next to nothing. But if he didn't sell, it would just keep piling up in inventory, accumulating costs. The more Lord Carter thought about it, the more annoyed he became, wishing he could shove the entire batch of goods back into the mouths of the people who developed them. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Sir, someone is here to see you. Who? A few vampires. They say they want to discuss a partnership with you. Lord Carter looked up, his brows slightly raised. Vampires. He hadn't heard of this race in a long time. If not for the butler's sudden report, he would have almost forgotten that these people hadn't completely gone extinct. Discuss business. Lord Carter confirmed again. Yes, sir. Facing business coming to his door, Lord Carter naturally had no reason to turn them away for no reason, so he simply nodded and said, then let them in. A few minutes later, 3 vampires walked into the office. The leader was a young man with a straight posture and handsome features, followed by 2 female vampires, one older and one younger. The younger one was looking around, clearly somewhat nervous. The older one was relatively composed, but one could still tell she was restrained. Zod spoke first. Hello, Lord Carter, my name is Zod. Lord Carter nodded, his gaze sweeping over him. His clothes were decent and clean, but it was obvious that they had been washed until they were faded, and the cuffs were frayed. He didn't look like a wealthy person at all. I heard you came to discuss business. Lord Carter leaned back in his chair. Tell me, what do you want to discuss? Zod glanced at the boxes of recording crystals in the corner of the office and got straight to the point. I've inquired, and it seems your factory has a batch of recording crystals that haven't been dealt with yet. You want to take them off my hands. Lord Carter immediately perked up. But Zod shook his head. No, I'm sorry, we don't have enough funds to take over this batch of recording crystals. Lord Carter's face immediately darkened. He had thought a buyer had finally arrived, but it turned out they were just looking to take advantage. He was already thinking of showing them the door. But Zod's next sentence made him pause. It's not that you can't sell the recording crystals. It's that you haven't given them a reason why they must buy them. Lord Carter looked up at him, his eyes full of suspicion. What do you intend to do? Zod took a notebook from Angel beside him and placed it on the table, pushing it in front of Lord Carter. You can take a look at this. I intend to use the recording crystals to create the content on this. Lord Carter glanced at the notebook. Written on the cover was, Black Hole Script. A script. A stage play. Zode nodded. Similar, but there are differences. You can take a look first. Lord Carter immediately became indifferent. A stage play script, huh? It wasn't like he hadn't seen them before. He himself was a guest of honor at a certain theater and often interacted with people in the theater world. Such socializing was also considered a high society activity. But the people in front of him didn't have a shred of high society aura. What kind of script could they possibly produce? Moreover, he hadn't never seen stage plays filmed with recording crystals, but it was precisely because the images from recording crystals couldn't be as realistic as real stage plays that the nobles despised them, which was why his recording crystals were piling up. Thinking of this, his mood turned bad again, and his hand flipping through the script couldn't help but want to throw it away. However, as he looked at the script, his eyes became unable to pull away. The story in the script begins with a very simple scene. Inside a print shop, a man stands wearily before a printing press, laboring away in repetition. However, as he works, the printing press suddenly stops. The man is confused, so he habitually gives the machine a pat, then tries to find tools to fix it. But the next second, the printing press restarts, and a sheet of white paper is printed. The man frowns as he picks up the paper. In the very center of the sheet is a pitch black circle. He does not seem to understand what happened, assuming it was just a printing error, and casually sets the paper with the black circle aside. But immediately afterward, when he inadvertently places a cup on the paper, the cup suddenly vanishes. The man is stunned for a moment, then looks at the paper. Subconsciously, he reaches toward the black circle and pulls the cup back out from within it. The man is filled with shock and suspicion. He picks up the paper and tries reaching through again, confirming once more that his hand can pass through the black circular pattern. This gives the man a crazy idea in an instant. He looks at a counter displaying goods not far away, walks over, and sticks the paper onto the glass display case. Then, he reaches out and easily takes the goods from inside the cabinet. The man is delighted, and immediately turns his greedy gaze toward the workshop owner's office. With the help of the black hole on the paper, he easily opens the locked door again and greedily stares at the locked safe. He quickly sticks the paper to the safe, reaches in, and pulls out a bag of gold coins directly. This excites him instantly, so he begins to take money from the safe at a faster pace. However, that is not enough. The man feels it is too slow, so he chooses to climb his entire body into the black hole, eventually passing through it completely and entering the safe. But the next second, the paper with the black circular pattern flutters in the breeze and falls lightly from the surface of the safe. And the man never comes out again. When Mr. Carter reads the last sentence of the script, he instantly feels a tingling sensation on his scalp. His tilde. What is going on? What happened next? Did the man come out? Could it be that no one found him, and he just stayed trapped inside until he died? Wait, if he is in a safe, and it is sealed well enough, maybe he would just suffocate. Wouldn't he die right there on the spot? An impatient emotion surges into his heart. Before Zode can make a move, Mr. Carter lifts his head first and asks Zode, pressing for an answer. What about the rest? Did the man come out? Was the safe opened? This is almost a subconscious action, and in that instant, Zode seems to feel a strange energy being injected into his body. It is very faint, almost imperceptible, but according to Zode's original memories, this is the kind of energy that only appears when other life forms feel adoration for a vampire. It worked. Zode's eyes light up. He had originally wanted to film a short movie as an experiment to see if he could gain adoration, but now it seems an experiment is unnecessary, the conclusion has already been reached. As for Mr. Carter's questioning, Zode responds with apparent composure. Mr. Carter, if you want to see the subsequent plot, please allow me to borrow the recording crystal you produce so I can present it to you in a brand new way. Mr. Carter looks Zode and the others up and down again. His gaze has changed slightly compared to just a moment ago. You want to use a recording crystal to film this? That is right. Then I do not know if you are aware that some people have already tried using recording crystals to film stage plays, but they did not receive an equivalent return. This is also an important reason why my products are backlogged. Mr. Carter had produced too many of these things at once, blindly believing they would sell well in the future, but now they are just sitting on his hands. However, he does start to become a little interested in what Zode said. At the very least, people who can write such an interesting story are rare. Hearing Mr. Carter's counter question, Zode shakes his head and says, I do not know if anyone has used them to film stage plays, but I can roughly guess that the people you mentioned probably just placed the recording crystal and the filming device in a fixed position and just kept recording like that, right? That is right. Shouldn't it be filmed that way? Mr. Carter is confused. Aside from placing it in a fixed position to film, what other way could there be? Of course not. If it were filmed like that, what difference would it make compared to sitting in the theater in person? It seems, Mr. Carter, you do not understand the greatest advantage of a recording crystal. Greatest advantage. You understand it. Mr. Carter frowns, clearly unhappy with Zode's questioning. A group of people recognized as backwards, and they have the nerve to stand here and tell me I do not understand popular things. Immersion. Zode holds up a finger. This is the greatest advantage of the footage captured by a recording crystal. It is something that cannot be achieved by sitting in a seat at a stage play and only being able to watch the performance from afar. Mr. Carter carefully chews on the adjective Zode used. But honestly, he is still completely unable to understand. Zode sees his reaction and is not particularly surprised. It is like an ancient human who only believes that a horse-drawn carriage is the most convenient mode of transportation. But the future belongs to automobiles. This is a limitation of the era. Seeing is believing, Mr. Carter. Why do you not give me a set of recording crystal filming equipment in an empty room, and I will personally demonstrate to you how a recording crystal is truly meant to be used? Mr. Carter hesitates for a few seconds, then nods in agreement. Regardless, he will not lose anything by agreeing. He is actually starting to get a little curious about what kind of work this race, widely considered out of touch with the times, will produce. Soon, Mr. Carter orders his men to clear out the office next door and prepares a safe large enough for a person to crawl into, as well as a simple printing press for Zode. Zode nimbly picks up the recording crystal, inserts it into the filming device, and then brings Triss and Angel into the empty room, standing beside Mr. Carter. So, Mr. Carter, I am going to begin. Mr. Carter nods and just stands to the side. Then, Zode faces Angel and Triss, teaching them from scratch how to use the device to film, and how the two of them need to follow him according to the rhythm. First, Angel, you hold the device and stand in front of me. Just, make sure the image in the device can just see my upper body and the printing press. Then, follow me according to the method I just instructed. Remember, you cannot make a single mistake, otherwise we will have to film it all over again. Do you understand? Facing the Grand Duke's arrangements, Angel nods seriously and says, Grand Duke, I will definitely do a good job. Please rest assured. At this moment, Angel thinks of the vampire kin. For these kin who are on the verge of collapse, what she is doing is nothing at all. As for Zode himself, he changes into a work uniform, stands before the printing press, takes a deep breath, and then faces the camera already set up in front of him. Alright, first take, action. Camera language is a very unique product of the Earth's film industry. Sometimes, in a movie, camera language can even directly determine the quality of the work. In a horror movie, a shaky camera can express a sense of unease. Yet, the same shaky camera presented in an action movie can highlight the intensity of a battle scene. This is also the biggest difference that sets movies apart from stage plays and other live performance programs. Although Zode was not a professional in the film industry, with years of experience in game development, having watched thousands of movies, and the fact that he was only replicating existing works, filming naturally did not pose much difficulty. Come, point the camera at me, then wait a moment, let me perform. Good, cut. Next, we'll shoot the next scene. Inside the room, Zode led Anchi, who was holding the recording device, filming haphazardly in various positions according to his instructions. Sometimes he would shove the camera directly at the black circular white paper prepared beforehand. Other times, he would aim the camera at the closed safe and then quickly back away. A moment later, Zode had Anchi point the camera at his face, while he struck various expressions and poses. Lord Carter stood at the doorway, his brow furrowing tighter and tighter. What is he doing? Filming. But what kind of filming is this? He had never seen such a strange method of filming. The story in the script was clearly very smooth, but now, the filming looked completely disjointed. At the very least, when filming, one should make the process understandable, right? Fortunately, he still possessed the composure befitting a noble and did not rudely interrupt Zode's filming. After all, it was he who allowed Zode to film, and before a result was presented, it would not be appropriate for him to stop it. Moreover, he couldn't quite determine whether it should be filmed this way. So, he took the opportunity to go outside and ask the butler to call over an old technician from the Carter factory to have someone else judge it. Not long after, the factory technician named Old Green arrived. He was the most senior person in the Carter factory and also the one who led the renovation of the recording crystal production line. When it came to who understood recording crystals best in the factory, it was definitely Old Green. Master, did you call for me? Old Green was repairing a machine on a production line, wearing a pair of leather overalls, holding a power wrench, and smelling of machine oil. Take a look at these guys. They are using a recording crystal to film something. Can you understand it? Lord Carter pointed at Zod and Anchi, who were still busy in the office, and said. Old Green turned to look, paused for a moment, and then asked uncertainly, Master, what are they filming? It is a type of stage play. According to them, it is a brand new form of stage play. A stage play, huh? Old Green scratched his head. I haven't really watched that stuff, but Master, if you want me to evaluate it, I feel I don't understand why his filming is so disjointed. Logically, the content recorded by the recording crystal should be complete, right? Exactly, that's what I thought too. Lord Carter nodded in agreement. Upon discovering that someone shared his thoughts, he couldn't help but look at Zod and the other and speak up. Mr. Zod, please pause for a moment. Zod was currently indulging his acting itch. Back on Earth, he didn't have many opportunities to do such things, mainly because he had no time due to rushing production versions every day. Being suddenly called out, both Zod and Anchi stopped their movements. Is there a problem? Of course there is. I am very curious why your filming is so messy, it doesn't look coherent at all. Zod answered matter-of-factly, because this is the filming process. It will be different once it is actually presented. Actually presented? Lord Carter asked, confused, won't all this content appear? Of course not. Zod nodded, but then realized something. Oh right, it seems you don't understand this method of filming. Zod had taken it for granted that he was still in a world like Earth. On Earth, filming movies and television shows this way was basically a basic industry operation. Sometimes the ending of a movie might even be completed right at the beginning of filming. But for this world that had not yet come into contact with a real film industry, his actions just now were indeed a bit perplexing. Lord Carter, just like I told you earlier, immersion is the key to the magic film I mentioned. These might look like messy fragments now, but just wait a little longer, and they can be combined into interesting content. Rather than explaining all sorts of principles now, Zod preferred to bring out the finished product later, at which point everything would be clear. Green, what do you think? Lord Carter frowned and turned to ask Old Green beside him. Old Green was unable to gauge the situation for a moment. Judging by Zod and his companion's appearance, they were likely not commoners, so he dared not offend them, nor did he dare offend his boss. So, he answered hesitantly, I'm not sure either. Master, you know, I'm just a worker. I don't understand these elegant things of you noble lords. Fair enough. Lord Carter nodded, no longer making things difficult for Old Green. Anyway, as to how this thing turns out, he would just have to wait until these vampires finished completely. A few minutes later, Zod finished all the filming. The original work was only a short film of about 2 minutes, and it didn't involve many scenes, so the efficiency was quite high when filming with full effort. Next came the work of editing the footage in the recording crystal. At this point, Zod couldn't help but marvel at the convenience of magic. This world was clearly only equivalent to the early industrial era, roughly equivalent to the Victorian era. But with the addition of magic, some things possessed capabilities far beyond the era. Zod only needed to release mana to directly adjust the recorded footage within the recording crystal, with efficiency comparable to an advanced editor from his past life. Moreover, the recording crystal already had a simple image cropping function, but in the past, most people only used it to trim the blank space at the beginning and end. No one had ever used it as a tool to reorganize a story. So, after another few minutes, a modified recording crystal, which recorded the complete short film, Black Hole, was completed. Lord Carter, now we can properly enjoy this brand new magic film. Hearing Zod's voice, Lord Carter, who had been distracted, returned to his senses and saw that Zod and Anchi had already inserted the recording crystal into the projection device and projected it onto a blank wall. Master Carter, if there is nothing else here, shall I take my leave? Seeing that there seemed to be nothing for him to do, and with the wall projecting something for the noble lords to watch, Old Green wanted to slip away. Having this time to brag with his fellow workers would definitely be more comfortable than staying here. Zod spoke to Old Green. Mr. Green, right. You can stay and enjoy it too. You said earlier that you couldn't understand this thing, but that is actually wrong. Anyone can understand this kind of thing. On the contrary, this is not some elegant thing, rather, it is suitable for everyone to watch. Old Green was taken aback, then looked at Lord Carter for confirmation. Lord Carter didn't say anything, just nodded slightly, which counted as permission for him to stay. Old Green had no choice but to stay obediently. Immediately after, in the next moment, everyone, including Lord Carter and Old Green, stared with wide eyes as they witnessed a scene they would never forget. The messy, fragmented, and chaotic footage from before was now rearranged into a clear storyline. Lord Carter had originally intended to find faults. But when the first segment of the image lit up, he suddenly realized that he didn't seem to have time to find faults. Because his eyes had already been captivated by the content on the screen. On the screen, the first thing to appear was the dispirited worker played by Zod, looking as if he were truly exhausted and ravaged by his work. Immediately following that was the discovery that the water cup would fall into the black hole on the paper, prompting astonishment from the worker played by Zod. The scene switched rapidly between different angles, and with every switch, it felt as though one were standing right beside this worker played by Zod, watching him step by step descend into the abyss of greed. Finally, as the scene ended in front of the safe, the camera pulled back step by step, and an inexplicable feeling of horror rushed over the viewer. Angie's mouth was slightly agape, her expression one of disbelief. Was this what she had just filmed? But she felt like she had just filmed a chaotic mess according to the Archduke's instructions. While filming, even Angie herself had some doubts about whether this sort of thing would actually work. Meanwhile, Triss, beside Angie, blinked her large eyes, unable to hide the astonishment in them. This was a feeling she had never experienced before. It felt so magical. That person had just disappeared into the safe like that. Greedy people are truly terrifying. Unlike us vampires, who are satisfied as long as we can drink some clean blood plasma to survive. On the other side, Lord Carter and Old Green had been silent for a long while, unable to speak. At this moment, Zod felt a slight feedback of the power of worship. This was a bit more than the worship contributed when Lord Carter read the script. But it was not enough. This bit of the power of worship was still unable to eliminate the madness of his kin. It seemed he had to expand the scale of viewership. Zod lowered his head, pondering, not paying too much attention to the reactions of Lord Carter and the others. Old Green opened his mouth. Just a moment ago, he had been inwardly criticizing Zod for using the recording crystal to film some nonsensical things. But after Zod reorganized and adjusted it, the scene presented before his eyes was quite smooth. Perhaps, the previous way of using the recording crystal was wrong. It wasn't just him, including Lord Carter and those noble gentlemen, everyone's method of using the recording crystal was wrong. And now, this, black hole, was the correct way to use the recording crystal. Before, he couldn't understand the things those noble gentlemen made, they were dry and boring. But this one before him, he understood completely. If possible, he even wanted to watch it again. Lord Carter also came back to his senses at this moment. For him, this experience was quite magical. Even though he had already read through the script once just before. He knew that the hand would reach in and take the water cup back out. He also knew that in the end, the worker would dive headfirst into the safe and be unable to get out. But when the scene froze on the safe and kept pulling back, he still couldn't help but hold his breath. This felt completely different from reading the script. Only now did he slightly understand what Zod meant. The value of the recording crystal was not in static filming, but in that, what was it called again? Right, immersion. Mr. Zod, was this an idea you came up with all by yourself? Lord Carter couldn't help but ask. At the very least, there shouldn't be a second person in this world who has thought of it yet. Zod answered ambiguously, then followed up. Lord Carter, how does this filming method feel to you? Very interesting. This was Lord Carter's first thought, almost without hesitation. Immediately after, he thought of those picky nobles. Especially for those nobles, this was the new trendy thing. Being trendy and fashionable was the behavior nobles currently loved to show off the most. And whoever could get their hands on a trendy item first would absolutely become the most dazzling person in noble circles. As long as this thing was currently popular, there would definitely be no worries about selling it. But, trendy things also have an expiration date. Once the nobles got tired of watching, it was very likely they would cast it aside and go chase after new things. Perhaps selling to these nobles could recoup the costs, but if he wanted to earn more, Mr. Zode, Lord Carter lowered his voice, can you produce a second work like this? The shrewd Lord Carter immediately realized that the recording crystal was not the main point. The point should be the black hole, filmed by Zode. So if there could be a second black hole, wouldn't that mean he could earn another fortune? Zode revealed a smile. Everything was within his expectations. Of course, and the works I can think of are quite numerous. If I could only create one black hole, I wouldn't have come to find you. I have come with sincerity. Before coming, Zode had taken Angie to investigate not just the factories capable of producing the recording crystal. At the same time, they also investigated the status of the factories, as well as the general situation of the factory owners themselves. Then, through inquiries from various sources, Zode ultimately chose Lord Carter. This was not a random choice. If he was to be a future partner, first of all, he could not be the type of guy who liked to stab people in the back for profit. And according to Zode's inquiries, Lord Carter at least did not sound like that kind of person. Of course, if Zode's judgment was incorrect, it didn't matter. The key to creation was in his own hands. At worst, he would just find another partner, it would just delay things a bit. In this era where industry was just rising, the last thing lacking was people seeking opportunities. Zode was not worried about not finding a good partner. Hearing Zode say he had come with sincerity, Lord Carter paused for only a second before proactively extending his hand. Then, Mr. Zode, it is an honor that you chose me. I am also willing to bring my sincerity and earn a fortune with you, how about that? Zode also smiled and extended his hand, shaking hands with Lord Carter. Lord Carter also hadn't expected that he would suddenly be collaborating with a vampire. But thinking about it seriously, it seemed that real vampires in this world were on the verge of extinction, yet some people had become even more bloodthirsty than vampires, stopping at nothing for profit. Compared to that, what did collaborating with a real vampire even amount to? Alright, let's skip the small talk, Lord Carter. I think we should expand our influence as soon as possible. Otherwise, if our good idea gets snatched up by someone else first, we will lose a huge sum of money. Right, it must be as soon as possible. Lord Carter nodded. Having managed factories for so many years, he understood the timeliness of an opportunity in this world better than anyone. Whoever created a fresh novelty first would be the most dazzling one, while others would just become background props. But, Mr. Zode, what should we do? Lord Carter was familiar with factory production, but he wasn't very skilled at other things. He knew this thing was great, but how could they sell it as quickly as possible? Naturally, it's to let as many people as possible see black hole at the same time. Then, in order to snatch up such an interesting novelty, they will choose to bid higher to buy it. Lord Carter was silent for a moment, then suddenly understood his meaning. Theaters. Zode nodded. This was the best promotional method Zode could think of, and it should also be the fastest way to obtain the power of worship at the moment. He couldn't sell a large quantity of recording crystals in a short time, but large-scale screenings in theaters would be different. If he could, Zode would love to set up screening equipment in every theater in the city right now and have them play it on a 24-hour loop. His kin were all waiting for him to quickly harvest the power of worship so he could go back and treat their mania. Lord Carter said, the Ruby Theater is one I frequent. My relationship with the manager there is quite good, he should be very willing to do me this small favor. In the bustling district of Grand City, the Ruby Theater stood as a favorite gathering spot for many of the city's nobles. Every evening, nobles would come here in groups to relax and enjoy an elegant performance. Then, if the opportunity arose, they would chat with the performers to display their aristocratic superiority. Afterward, they would move on to their next engagement, heading to some noble's residence for an evening banquet to discuss the day's events. This was the nightlife of the nobles in Grand City. Mr. Ram, I only need 15 minutes. It's the perfect gap between acts to showcase something I've just created. Behind the scenes at the Ruby Theater, Zode, Carter, and the others had arrived to negotiate with the theater owner, Ram. Ram was clearly hesitant. Those noble lords were not to be trifled with. Ram said with difficulty, it's not that I don't want to help you, but you know how picky the noble lords can be. Carter immediately put his arm around Ram's shoulder in a familiar manner, aren't we good friends? I'm a frequent patron of this theater, surely you can help me with this small favor. We are good friends, yes, but. Zode spoke up from the side, Mr. Ram, we won't make things difficult for you. How about this? We can rent the empty time slots during your stage plays. You can name a fair price, so you'll earn some money, and if anyone wants to buy our recording crystal from you, you'll also get a commission. According to the memories of the Grand Duke of Blood, this world was essentially shackled by capital, and almost everything was driven by profit. This was annoying, as it made everything very pragmatic. But at the same time, the benefit was that if you paid enough, anything could be arranged. Hearing that there would be money involved, Ram's expression changed noticeably. This gentleman, may I ask who you are? Ram looked Zod up and down. He seemed like a person of extraordinary temperament, but his clothes were somewhat faded from washing, suggesting he wasn't very wealthy. You can call me Zod. I trust this should be enough for now. Very well, Mr. Zod. How much are you willing to pay to rent the empty slots during my stage plays? Zod looked at Carter, who immediately understood and held up 2 fingers to Ram. 2 gold coins. We only need to rent a few minutes of downtime during your stage play's curtain call. That's a good deal, isn't it? Carter steeled himself internally. Having seen Black Hole, he felt this thing was worth a gamble. He might as well spend the money. After all, the loose change from his investment in the recording crystal was more than this amount. If he could sell the recording crystal at a normal price, he would be making a profit. Well, I suppose that's acceptable. Usually, the money collected from each show was around a dozen gold coins, so suddenly earning 2 more seemed pretty good. Before Carter could rejoice, Ram spoke again, but I must say this in advance. If the noble lords protest, I will stop it immediately, and the rent will not be refunded. Deal. Carter gritted his teeth and agreed. He wasn't short on this bit of money. Might as well take the easy money. If you don't take it, there are plenty of others who will. Don't even talk about Carter and Ram being good friends. Ram was sure that if Carter went to the theater across the street and offered 2 gold coins to rent the curtain call gap, they wouldn't even say a word of refusal. So, this money might as well land in his own pocket. But then again, Ram, who had happily accepted the 2 gold coins, asked, by the way, what exactly is in this recording crystal of yours? Is it worth paying such a high price? What if you don't sell a single one? That's none of your concern. Fine then. I'll play this thing during the gap after the next play. I'm not a heartless guy, so take these tickets. You can watch the next stage play directly, consider it a bonus for your rent. Carter naturally had no reason to refuse. 1 ticket cost 1 silver coin, every bit saved was worth it. Besides, he truly wanted to stay and see the reactions of those who watched Black Hole. Night fell, and the streets of Grand City lit up with specks of light, magic lamps in front of some wealthy homes that could barely illuminate the road. Meanwhile, carriages appeared from both sides of the road, stopping one after another in front of the several theaters in the district. At this time, gentlemen usually stepped out of their carriages first, opened the doors, and invited the beautifully dressed ladies to disembark. The theater doors would open at this moment, with attendants standing on both sides to welcome the nobles visiting that evening. After everyone was seated, the stage play began right on time. The actors performed with all their might on stage, attempting to move every noble present. However, most of the nobles were just chatting and laughing, not really paying much attention to the performers. This was mainly because they had seen these stage plays too many times. They were nothing more than stories about knights and princesses, dragons and hunters, or princes and Cinderellas. Carter, Zod, and the others sat in a slightly peripheral spot. Carter appeared somewhat distracted. He had already seen the plot of the stage play, and now his mind was entirely filled with worries that Black Hole would fail to pique the interest of these nobles. He had been so confident before, but now that he was facing reality, he still felt a bit anxious. Angie and Triss, however, were watching very intently. For them, this kind of aristocratic pastime was fresh enough. Vampires had lived in poverty before and had no spare money to watch such aristocratic pastimes, so everything felt very novel to them. Zod's gaze, however, was not on the plot. He was watching the actors. They were performing diligently, each one giving their all, and their acting techniques seemed quite good. Perhaps one day, he could find a way to recruit them as actors under his command. Don't let it fool you that Zod could almost film Black Hole independently. But a true film required a rather large number of actors and staff. And the bigger the production, the more people were needed. It was better to find some good acting talent now, rather than scrambling at the last minute later. Finally, after the knight in the play died heroically and the heartbroken princess wept into a puddle of tears, the story reached its end. The curtain call narration appeared, revealing the final outcome of the play. Immediately after, the actors on stage lined up, bowed deeply to the audience, and then walked off the stage in order. Mr. Zode, it's time, it's time. Next is our work. The idle Carter perked up again, watching with glowing eyes as the stage and the auditorium gradually darkened. Huh, why did the lights go out? At this moment, an abrupt voice rang out. Is the Ruby Theater too stingy to spend money on lights? You should have said so. I'll pay for the lighting. I certainly don't want people looking down on me, saying I watched a stage play in a theater that couldn't even afford to turn on the lights. As the lights in the theater gradually dimmed, the nobles began to voice mocking, jesting comments, which were immediately followed by a burst of laughter from the others. At this moment, Ram stepped out first, seemingly genuinely afraid of being misunderstood by these nobles. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for not notifying you in advance. We have just added a small intermission program, and I hope it will bring you some extra enjoyment. A small program. What kind of thing is it? It's this. Ram gestured to his staff, who immediately wheeled out a projection device and placed it in the pre-arranged gap among the crowd. The nobles closest to it recognized the device at a glance and looked on with confusion. Is this a recording crystal? Ram nodded. That's right, it is a recording crystal. Before Ram could even finish speaking, several nobles stood up immediately, looking completely uninterested. So it's just a recording crystal. What kind of program is that supposed to be? Watching this soulless thing just makes one drowsy. I'm going out for a drink of water. After this noble spoke, several others stood up as well, evidently showing no interest in this intermission program. Furthermore, having to turn off the lights just to watch this small program made people feel somewhat uncomfortable. Ram immediately felt a pang of regret. I knew it, he thought. This thing was doomed to fail. But since he had already taken the other party's money, he had to play it regardless. However, he was prepared to shut it down at any moment. If the nobles protested again, he would immediately turn off the projection. Then he would offer a sincere apology to the nobles present, hoping to make them forget this brief unpleasantness. That way, he would have the money, and he wouldn't offend the nobles too much. With this in mind, Ram's staff finished setting up the projection device and entered the final stage of playback. By this time, many nobles had already walked out of the theater area to grab a glass of fine red wine outside, planning to return when the next act began. As for the nobles who stayed behind, it wasn't that they were interested in this thing, they were simply too lazy to get up. Following that, the content of the recording crystal began to play. At this moment, some nobles were still whispering among themselves, discussing Ram's foolish move. Comments about how recording crystals lacked soul, that only live performances were the proper way to do things, and that Ram was exploiting trust for profit gradually emerged. Just as the dejected worker played by Zode appeared on the projection, Ram already wanted to shut the whole thing down right there and then, hoping to salvage his reputation as much as possible. He then saw him gently wave his hand at the attendant operating the device, signaling him to stop immediately. However, the attendant seemed as if he had been nailed to the spot, staring straight at the screen without moving, having long forgotten that he was supposed to be waiting for his boss's orders at all times. Ram was stunned for a moment, then turned his head to look at the screen. By this time, the content on the screen had reached the point where the worker was using the black hole paper to retrieve items from the container. This left Ram completely confused. He hadn't watched it from the beginning, so his perception wasn't as intense as his subordinates. At the same time, he noticed something else. Just a moment ago, one could still hear the delicate laughter of noble ladies in the audience, seemingly chatting about something interesting, but now the auditorium was gradually falling silent. Something was wrong. Ram frowned, trying to figure out what was going on. But because the short film was only 2 minutes long in total, before Ram could make any judgment, the screen froze on that safe, and then the projected image went dark again, with the word, "End," appearing on the screen. At this moment, the entire auditorium was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. This kind of situation hadn't even happened during official stage performances, where there would always be at least some whispering. Could it be that some people felt they had been fooled and were getting ready to explode in anger? Ram immediately broke into a cold sweat and hurriedly tried to get his staff to turn on the lights so he could offer a proper apology. But suddenly, the voice of a noble lady rang out from a box on the second floor of the auditorium. Wait, did that person come out in the end? This question was like a fuse, triggering a chain reaction. Some nobles in the audience also reacted, one after another calling out. What happened next? Is that it? Did that person come out or not? Wait a minute, was what just played a stage play? How did it look so real? Play it again. Yes, play it again. The venue became extremely noisy, the outburst of sound exceeding any intermission during a curtain call in the past. Wah! Ram was stunned, clearly still not understanding what was going on. But looking at the current situation, it seemed, these nobles really liked what had just been played. What exactly was played just now? Ram had been too busy waiting to apologize and hadn't paid any attention to the content being played. Now, he actually felt a hint of regret. But he was also a seasoned veteran who had been in business for many years, and he immediately reacted to the situation. Amidst the clamor of the nobles, Ram stood on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, would you like to watch what was just played one more time? Don't be ridiculous. Hurry up and play it again. We didn't see it clearly just now. Ram immediately said calmly. Then, in accordance with everyone's request, we will play it one more time shortly. However, before that, I would like to say one more thing. If any of you have a device at home to play recording crystals, you can purchase the Black Hole short film crystal tonight. However, quantities are limited. Guests who do not have a playback device can also come to me to register and purchase a recording crystal projector from Carter Workshop. Give me one. Yes. Give me one too. At this very moment, this gadget, which the nobles had considered outdated, seemed to have become fashionable again. And those nobles who had walked out earlier, upon returning, looked on in utter confusion as the other nobles clamored to buy the recording crystals. What's going on? I only went out for a few minutes, how did everything change so drastically? What happened just now? In the corner of the auditorium, Carter was already wearing an expression of wild joy. It really sold. And these nobles seemed very enthusiastic about it. For these nobles, having a fresh and trendy gadget that one could obtain first and show off to those around them meant becoming the most dazzling person for some time to come. Therefore, when these nobles saw that the black hole recording crystal was very interesting, the first thing they thought of was taking it back to show off to the people around them. For Zod, it didn't matter how much money the recording crystal sold for. As long as this path of culture could succeed, Zod had countless ways to make money and was in no rush for this moment. Of course, Mr. Carter had also made a promise that the profits from the recording crystal could be split 50-50. This was slightly beyond Zod's expectations. He hadn't expected Mr. Carter to be so generous, at least not the kind of capitalist vampire he had imagined. However, Zod also understood that this was because Mr. Carter knew the recording crystal itself was not important. What mattered was the black hole that Zod had created. Without black hole, his recording crystal would have to be sold for a pittance. He was still counting on Zod to provide more works like this. For now, money was not important to Zod. The power of worship was what mattered. This concerned the survival of the vampire race. In the Ruby Theater, after those nobles watched the first showing of Black Hole, Zod truly felt wisps of the power of worship beginning to flow into his body. This immediately gave Zod the feeling of rain after a long drought. This body of the Blood Grand Duke was already dilapidated, enduring the erosion of the poisonous blood had ultimately cost the original owner of the body his life. Therefore, when the pure power of worship was injected into his body, even just a little bit, it made Zod feel an unprecedented sense of comfort. His previously pale and shriveled skin began to fill out slightly, and his spirit felt much better. Moreover, this was not a one-time improvement. The more Black Hole was played in the Ruby Theater, the faster his body recovered. It wasn't just Zod. Triss and Angie beside him also felt an inexplicable comfort, which pleasantly surprised both of them. In the corner of the auditorium, Angie whispered happily to Zod, Grand Duke, I don't seem as weak as I was just a moment ago. Triss felt the same way, and now she was looking at Zod with stars in her eyes. The Grand Duke is amazing. To think that this kind of thing actually helps with recovery. Zod nodded with a smile, acting profound as if he had anticipated this all along. Zod was equally happy. Because this completely confirmed that his hypothesis was correct. And now, Mr. Carter, my people and I have matters to attend to and must leave. As for the second work, I will complete it as soon as possible. Mr. Carter was also immersed in a happy atmosphere at this moment. The product that was originally going to be sold for a pittance had now become a rare novelty in the eyes of these nobles. Are you leaving already? We can split the money in a while. Aren't you worried that I might underreport the income to you? Mr. Carter said with some regret. He really enjoyed the feeling of watching the money roll in. This is my choice, and I believe that you are not that kind of person, Mr. Carter. So, I will be leaving first. Whether Mr. Carter would actually underreport the income didn't matter, the power of worship was already in hand. Now, the priority was to rush to save his clansmen. If Mr. Carter really did underreport it, then at least he would have seen the man's true colors, and at worst, he could just find a new partner. With countless cultural works in his mind, Zode wasn't worried about this at all. Mr. Carter was speechless for a moment, he truly hadn't expected someone to trust him like this. Why did he even feel a little touched? Thus, Zode took Triss and Angie and left first, quickly returning to the dilapidated hall. Everyone. We are saved. The Grand Duke has found a new way to survive. Arriving at the door of the hall, Triss couldn't wait to push it open and shouted excitedly. However, the next second, she saw some vampire clansmen lying weakly on the ground, their lives uncertain. These were the clansmen who still retained their conscious will, responsible for watching over the crazed clansmen while Zode and the others were away. But after such a long time, these conscious clansmen were clearly unable to hold on much longer. Angie followed her in, and upon seeing the state of the clansmen, she rushed over to check on them one by one. Only after confirming that they had just fainted from weakness did she breathe a sigh of relief, feeling somewhat fortunate. Fortunately, those crazed clansmen hadn't broken free from their restraints, otherwise, if they ran out and were discovered by a vampire hunter or the church. Zode also walked into the hall at this moment and came to Angie and the others. Grand Duke, we tried our best, but I'm afraid our race cannot hold on any longer. A clansman who was still conscious leaned against the wall, looking at the three who had returned and offering a forced smile. It's all right. We came back to solve the problem. You have already done your best, leave the rest to me. Zode patted this vampire on the shoulder, feeling a bit moved. Regardless, these people would be his closest group in the future, and their fortunes were intertwined, saving them was also helping himself. Moreover, these people were absolutely the most loyal, and the bond of blood was at least more reliable than outsiders. Zode didn't believe he could live well in this world all by himself. There is strength in numbers, which is a universal truth. Zode stood up and walked over to the bound, crazed clansman. Arg! The vampire in front of him bared terrifying fangs, with a ferocious expression and blood-red eyes. Zode was quite curious that such an analgesic mixture could have such a huge impact on the vampire race. Indeed, addicts were not worth sympathizing with, as they even ended up implicating others. A faint light radiated from Zode's body. It was different from the power replenished after drinking plasma. It was the purest power of worship, the kind that even many church factions would covet. This faint light permeated his whole body, condensing into a half-meter force field around him. Then, Zode walked up to the nearest crazed clansman and completely enveloped the other with the faint light. The pure power of worship possessed the function of purifying filth. Under such a purifying effect, the originally crazed vampire really began to gradually calm down. The expression became less ferocious, and the eyes were no longer blood red, but instead held a trace of inexplicable confusion and surprise. Soon, the symptoms of the first crazed clansman subsided rapidly, but for safety, Zode did not untie them, instead immediately walking toward the second crazed clansman and releasing the purifying light once more. Repeating this process, it took a full half-day, but all the crazed clansmen were purified by Zode's purifying light, and their eyes became clear. After purifying the last clansman, Zode finally breathed a sigh of relief, his expression one of gratification. No matter what, this could now be considered the first step in his development in this world. However, during the purification process, Zode also discovered that the purification did not seem to be complete. He could still detect a trace of frenzy in the blood within these clansmen. It seemed that completely purifying the addict plasma they had drunk would not be easy. At least, the current power of worship was not enough. Looking at this group of vampire clansmen who had gradually calmed down and were all quite refined and beautiful, Zode already had a plan for what to do next. Inside the hall, the vampires gradually woke up from their weakness, still looking a bit dazed. Immediately after, they saw a familiar face. Archduke. Zode was sitting to the side, seemingly chatting about something with Angel and Triss. Hearing the voice, Zode turned his head and smiled. Are you all awake? Archduke, we drank the blood of those who took the pain relief potion. Several of the previously frenzied vampires lowered their heads, looking full of shame like children who had made a mistake. Their memories remained intact even when they were out of their minds, and they knew exactly what they had done at that time. This also made them feel even more remorseful after waking up. I know you were starving, which is normal, so don't be upset over such things. Zod walked up to them, with no hint of blame in his eyes. Just be careful in the future. Besides, I don't think we need to worry about survival anymore. Several vampires immediately looked up, staring at Zod in confusion. Archduke. Do you remember how you recovered? These vampires began to recall, and soon remembered what Zod had done yesterday. A pure white light had shone upon them, dispersing most of the toxicity in their bodies, leaving only a small portion of stubborn toxicity that could not yet be eradicated. Archduke, what was that light you released yesterday? Zod said, you are all clansmen born later, so it's normal that you don't know. This is the condensed power of worship, which is much purer than the power obtained from blood. Several vampires immediately widened their eyes in surprise. Worship, but Archduke, aren't we forbidden from proselytizing? Worship doesn't necessarily require proselytizing. You can ask Angel and Triss for the details. For now, recover a bit more. Once you're fully recovered, we will have a proper talk about what to do next. The toxicity in your bodies hasn't been completely eradicated yet, so to eliminate it and ensure our future survival, we still need to obtain more power of worship. These vampires looked toward Angel and Triss not far away. A few minutes later, these vampire clansmen were still in a bit of a daze. They had already learned the source of the power of worship from Angel and Triss. And this method of obtaining it was something they truly had never expected. You mean something made with a recording crystal was shown to those nobles, and it made them worship the Archduke? What on earth is that thing? Angel and Triss naturally couldn't explain it clearly either, so they simply set up the retrieved recording crystal in a projection device, and played the short film, The Black Hole, for these vampires. Once the screening was finished, the vampires instantly fell silent. Angel thought her clansmen still didn't understand the source of the worship and was about to explain further, when the vampires spoke up again. Did that person get out? What was that? How could there be a black hole on a piece of paper? It feels so uncomfortable, but, can we watch it again? I want to watch it again too. Angel opened her mouth, temporarily at a loss for words. The reaction of her clansmen left her not knowing how to respond. Facing the vampires' questions, Zod spoke up again. According to my experiments, the power of worship is probably not as simple as just gaining adoration. Any emotion like liking an individual or a group can also be classified as worship. However, I haven't fully figured out the details yet, which is why I need everyone's cooperation next to complete the production of the next play. Next, Zod handed a brand new script to the vampire clansman. And on the cover of that script, the words, Sherlock Holmes Magic Film Script, were written. Compared to the previous script for The Black Hole, this script was more than just a little bit thicker. The Black Hole was merely Zod's strategy to quickly confirm the method of obtaining the power of worship. Once confirmed, Zod began to plan the filming of a long-form narrative story. Ultimately, The Black Hole short film was nothing more than a conceptual gimmick. It was enough to get people talking, but the hype would likely fade quickly. Once that happened, the nobles' sense of novelty would disappear along with it, and the power of worship would return to its previous state. To obtain a more lasting power of worship, only a true feature-length story could possibly achieve it. It just so happened that the clansmen had temporarily returned to normal, so he could just use them as labor to complete the filming. And the movie, Sherlock Holmes, became Zod's next choice. This movie was an adaptation of the famous novel, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. It was also a work that Zod liked very much, and 2 films had been made of it in total. In past films and TV shows, Sherlock Holmes was always portrayed as calm and wise, but this movie served as a new deconstruction, giving Sherlock Holmes a more human side. Choosing this movie, besides his personal preference, was also because its background was similar to the Victorian industrial era, which perfectly matched the era of this world. Thus, he only needed to slightly modify some of the settings to completely transplant it to this world for filming. He could also change Sherlock Holmes's identity to a vampire. The character's naturally eccentric and reclusive personality happened to match that of a vampire, making it a perfect combination. So, after temporarily curing his clansmen, Zod immediately set to work writing the script. Relying on his deep memory of having watched it over a dozen times, combined with the unique physical traits of a vampire, Zod could even clearly remember every storyboard detail of Sherlock Holmes. All that was left was to describe it in full. A group of vampires gathered around the script, craning their necks to look curiously, all wanting to see what kind of thing could move those humans and how it could obtain the power of worship. I know you still have many questions, but it doesn't matter. Next, you just need to follow my plan. To complete this plan, the most important thing is our specialty, acting. Zod spoke eloquently, repeating what he had told Angel and the others before. In the past, our acting skills were used to deceive other races, either to drink their blood or to turn them into blood cultists. Now, neither of these paths is viable, but that doesn't mean acting and deception are useless, we just used them in the wrong place before. Now, we will use the acting and deception we excelled at in the past to enter a brand new industry, allowing us to gain worship once again. Isn't this exactly what we've dreamed of? So act to your heart's content, unleash your acting skills, and conquer those ordinary people. The next day, Grand City operated as usual. Workers woke up early to go to work, while the nobles and their heirs were still fast asleep. Meanwhile, Ms. Luna, the newspaper owner and also a noble heir herself, had already risen early and entered the office with her employees to begin the day's work. She needed to finish reviewing and approving the content early in the morning and send it to the printing press as quickly as possible, ensuring the newspapers were delivered to the nobles before they woke up. Otherwise, newspaper sales would take a major hit. Sitting behind her desk, Ms. Luna sipped her black tea while reviewing the intelligence provided by yesterday's contributors and informants. The content was the same as always. It was all about certain nobles getting drunk on the streets, an actress receiving flowers, or a stage play preparing new material. Ms. Luna's job was to compile this information and publish it, providing these nobles with daily gossip to enrich their social circles. Of course, it was also to entertain herself. Starting this newspaper wasn't entirely about making money. As a daughter of nobility, she could drink tea at home all day without ever having to worry about making a living. But running a newspaper allowed her to get first-hand news about interesting things. This was her hobby in life. After reading through the stream of information and selecting a few pieces for today's newspaper, Ms. Luna prepared to hand the approved documents to her employees for typesetting and production. But just then, a new piece of information caught Ms. Luna's eye. A lot of nobles gathered at the Ruby Theater yesterday. This single piece of news was nothing special on its own. Theaters were the favorite gathering spots for nobles. However, Ms. Luna recalled seeing other information regarding the Ruby Theater earlier. Ms. Luna immediately turned back to search again, quickly finding several pieces of content related to the Ruby Theater. Ruby Theater introduces a new show during intermission. Very few people left during the intermission at the Ruby Theater, and even those who did returned quickly. Ruby Theater is selling a brand new kind of recording crystal. Nobles are discussing recording crystals and something called the black hole. When she pieced all this information together, Ms. Luna's sharp instincts sensed something unusual. Following this trail, she searched again and quickly found several more pieces of information related to the black hole. Some nobles are offering high prices to buy something called the black hole, which seems to be a type of recording crystal. Some nobles are discussing topics like safes and black holes. Ms. Luna immediately stood up, walked out of her office, and asked loudly, "Does anyone know anything about the Ruby Theater and that black hole thing? Can we talk?" Inside the office, several people raised their hands and then entered Ms. Luna's office. "Tell me, what is this the black hole? Do any of you know about it?" Ms. Luna looked at the employees in front of her. They were ordinary people from all walks of life who worked other jobs during the day and came to her place at night and in the early morning to earn extra money. "Boss, I know a bit. I'm a handyman at the Ruby Theater. Yesterday, during the intermission of a play, the Ruby Theater played something from a recording crystal. That thing was very special. What appeared inside was a piece of paper that could swallow a cup. No, it didn't just swallow a cup. It could even swallow a whole person." Another employee, who was a servant to a noble, immediately disagreed and said with absolute certainty, "Boss, that thing swallowed a person, and then that person was locked inside a safe and couldn't get out." Another person, who worked part-time as a banquet waiter, spoke up, "The black hole. I think I heard the nobles at the party arguing about it all night, constantly saying that the black hole was unrealistic and things like that. They almost got into a physical fight. Oh, and those nobles seemed to have visited the Ruby Theater during the day." Those who hadn't spoken looked a bit bewildered. What was all this nonsense? A black hole, a safe, what was so interesting about that? Ms. Luna, however, seemed to gradually piece together the whole story. The Ruby Theater must have found some novel thing made with a recording crystal, which then sparked the interest and discussion of those nobles. This was highly unusual. Something that could make so many nobles argue until they were red in the face definitely had something extraordinary about it. At this moment, someone asked tentatively, "Boss, are you planning to use this as content for the newspaper?" "I have that in mind, but perhaps we need to investigate first. We can't rashly publish news that hasn't been thoroughly verified." Ms. Luna pondered for a moment, then suddenly said, "I'll go to the Ruby Theater myself. Let's publish today's newspaper with the current finalized draft first. As for this Ruby Theater matter, we can publish it tomorrow." With that, Ms. Luna grabbed her coat, tossed the finalized files to her employees, and prepared to head straight to the Ruby Theater. She returned to the newspaper office that same afternoon. Returning with Ms. Luna was a recording crystal engraved with the name The Black Hole. She finished watching the content on the recording crystal. How should she put it? It was a very unique experience. She had thought that what was played on the recording crystal would be nothing more than some filmed footage. The nobles might have only been scrambling for it to look trendy in the eyes of others. But after watching it, she realized it was not like that at all. While watching, Ms. Luna felt as if she were personally standing inside the frame. She could almost feel the breath of the tired worker in the scene. This was not an experience one could get from an ordinary stage play. Especially in the final scene, when the camera lingered on the closed safe, Ms. Luna actually felt a hint of dread. She finally understood why those nobles were arguing about the black hole in the safe. How terrifying it was for a person to be trapped alive inside a safe because of greed. Immediately after, Ms. Luna found a way to investigate the information regarding this recording crystal. She wanted to see who on earth had created this thing. Eventually, she traced it back to Carter's recording crystal manufacturing factory. Now, this thing had become a hot seller among the nobles. Anyone who owned one would immediately become the talk of certain noble circles. For the nobles, this was as intoxicating as drinking a stimulant elixir. Therefore, the first thing Ms. Luna did upon returning to the office was to quickly pick up her pen and decisively write a headline. Others might not have realized it yet, but with her sharp intuition, she knew this would definitely be a turning point that would change things. She was not about to let such an opportunity slip by easily. "Last night, I was captivated by the black hole." The next morning, Ms. Luna went straight to the printing press with the other drafts she had reviewed that morning. "Sir, we need to print extra copies of this batch of newspapers." "How many more?" "Double it. I want everyone to know what is in here." In the morning, the nobles were gradually waking from their dreams, preparing to plan their activities for the day. Some planned to attend cocktail parties. Some planned to research new gadgets and novelties. And today, they had a new activity added to their list. That was to go to the Ruby Theater to see that novel creation. Yesterday, some nobles began showing off at various cocktail parties that they had seen the work titled, Black Hole. The first thing they would say was how amazing this thing was, and they would cryptically claim that they had already obtained the original copy of this work, but that they had paid a huge price for it and wouldn't easily show it to others. This immediately piqued the curiosity of many nobles. In a noble's mansion within the city, a baron stretched as he got out of bed, then, attended by a group of maids, came to the dining table, preparing to enjoy the day's meal. "Darling, did you go to the noble's cocktail party yesterday?" The baron elegantly picked up his knife and fork, preparing to eat his breakfast, when he suddenly heard his wife's question and felt somewhat puzzled. "No, I was at home taking magic potions all day yesterday. You know, I've been preparing for the Empire's magic research and innovation technology recently." "Oh, then you must not know about the new thing that suddenly appeared in the city, right?" "A new thing? Is there anything new recently?" The Baron carefully recalled, but he didn't remember any magic research institutes having come up with any new gimmicks. "No, it's not something newly created, it's the recording crystal from before. Someone used a recording crystal to make something incredible, and it was very popular at the Ruby Theater yesterday." Upon hearing, recording crystal, the Baron immediately became indifferent. "Is that so? How popular could it be? I heard it's so popular that many nobles are fighting tooth and nail just to be the first to get their hands on that interesting thing." "Oh." The Baron raised his head again, feeling a slight spark of interest. "So darling, why don't we go to the Ruby Theater this morning to see what that thing actually is? That way, we'll have something to talk about in front of other nobles, won't we?" The Baron thought for a moment before nodding. "That works. Consider it a morning relaxation, it wouldn't hurt to accompany you to see it." "You're so good, darling." The lady revealed a joyful smile, looking quite excited, her beautiful figure starting to heave, leaving the Baron feeling parched. The carriage soon left the Baron's mansion, heading toward the Ruby Theater. But while on the road, a newsboy's hawking voice came from outside the carriage. Extra, extra. The new creation at the Ruby Theater is becoming the new trend in the eyes of the nobles. They are all talking about the man who climbed into the safe. The Baron and the Baroness sitting in the carriage lifted the curtain and saw the newspaper in the hands of the newsboy hawking outside. Go buy one. The Baron ordered lightly, and his subordinate immediately went to the newsboy, tossed a copper coin, took a newspaper, and handed it with both hands to the noble in the carriage. The Baron opened the newspaper and began to flip through it, discovering that it was actually the Luna Daily. Wasn't this the newspaper founded by that out-of-place daughter of a duke? I never expected I would voluntarily read such a boring newspaper. But who could help it when the new creation at the Ruby Theater, which all the other nobles were discussing, had suddenly appeared in it? Through the newspaper, the Baron learned more basic details. It turned out to be a work created by a recording crystal, and the content seemed similar to a stage play. It's just that the description of this work in the newspaper was very special, and as for how special, one could only understand the full picture by seeing it in person. This made the Baron even more curious. What kind of work could possibly have such appeal? At the same time, in front of Carter's workshop, carriages loaded with recording crystals were parked. Workers were rushing to transport the new batch of black hole recording crystals that had been produced. Carter was also standing at the door, with unconcealable joy in his eyes. It really succeeded. The recording crystals that he had originally planned to sell cheaply had now transformed and become the rarest item for the nobles. Taking a gamble was indeed worth it. Just on the first day, these nobles were fighting over wanting to buy 10 or 20 of them. That's right, it wasn't that one person only bought one, every noble wanted to buy 10 or 20. And these nobles were quite competitive, whoever bought more, the others wished they could buy even more than them. The noble who bought the most even purchased 100 recording crystals in one go. To them, money didn't seem like money, and face was far more important than money, and Carter had never felt that money was so easy to earn. The current inventory of recording crystals was being depleted rapidly. That very night, Carter decided without hesitation to restart the recording crystal production line. If he didn't take advantage of this time to earn more, when else could he? Similarly, wisps of power of worship were released from Carter and entered into Zod within the hall, becoming a part of Zod's power of worship. Besides this, the theater owner, Ram, was also full of joy at this moment. Originally, the audience for recent stage plays had been slowly dwindling. For many years, the nobles had long grown tired of various cliché story plots, and the number of people was gradually decreasing. His Ruby Theater was actually also looking for a new way to make money. But a new way to make money had just appeared so suddenly, which was truly a pleasant surprise. Of course, even he himself had been unable to help but get immersed when watching Black Hole, so he had secretly kept a black hole recording crystal for himself, so he could find a place to watch it a few more times whenever he wanted. This feeling of being personally on the scene was something he had never experienced before. This news naturally couldn't be kept secret, and other theaters learned of it that very day. They were also worrying about declining theater revenue, and suddenly hearing that one theater was very popular, they wished they could immediately learn all the details. Meanwhile, inside the Vampire Hall, Zod was also holding a copy of the Luna Daily he had just obtained, reading the description of black hole on it. It seems the speed of information spread in this world is quite fast, not closed off at all. He hadn't even thought of a way to promote it yet, and people had already started helping him promote it voluntarily. Very good, it seems, black hole is fermenting, so we can continue to obtain power of worship for some time. Angie also took the newspaper and began reading it carefully. After confirming repeatedly that it was promoting black hole, and not some adjectives like vampire or heretic, she breathed a sigh of relief, then immediately looked at Zod again. Grand Duke, by that logic, can your black hole continue to gain power of worship? I can't guarantee how long it will last specifically, but it should be able to hold out until we create our next work. Zod moved his gaze away from the newspaper, then looked at several clansmen not far away who were striking strange poses. All right everyone, are you ready? Next, I will officially enter the casting phase. For these vampire kin, hearing that the Duke could obtain the power of worship by using a recording crystal left them with expressions of confusion and bewilderment. Some even found it hard to believe. Yet, the soft halo flowing around Zod's body proved that what he said seemed to be correct. Especially when they looked at the newspaper coverage of the black hole and saw the halo on Zod growing slightly, it became hard not to believe. Moreover, several among them had their madness temporarily suppressed. Therefore, when Zod handed them the scripts, they all began to perform with all their might. After Zod confirmed they had entered their acting state, he prepared to start selecting the leads for Sherlock Holmes. It was currently inconvenient to recruit human actors on a large scale, so for this first official magic film, most roles would have to be filled by the kin first. Fortunately, playing ordinary people was simple enough, they just needed to cover up their pale vampire faces. Just as Zod was thinking about the character arrangements, the sound of wheels and horse neighing came from outside the hall. Several vampires immediately looked toward the entrance, curious about who would come to the vampire hall. Were they not afraid of a one-way trip? The person who arrived was Mr. Carter. Before Zod returned to the hall, he had given his contact address to him. This ensured that if anything happened, he could be found immediately. But he hadn't expected him to show up so soon. Mr. Zod, I didn't expect you to live in such a remote place. I thought vampires would live in luxurious ancient castles. That is history. As you can see, we vampires are not living well right now. Zod just shrugged at Mr. Carter's words, then walked forward. Mr. Carter, are you here now to split the money with me, or is there something else? Of course, I'm here to split the money. This is your share. Mr. Carter smiled. The last time he smiled like that was before producing the recording crystal. He pulled a pouch from his chest and handed it to Zod. A total of 13 gold coins. We sold over 100 of the previously produced recording crystals, and the rest have been mostly pre-ordered by those nobles. According to their previous agreement, Mr. Carter would split half the profits with Zod. It was just a casual remark back then, he originally had no hope for making a profit, thinking it would be good enough just to recover costs. But now he could earn quite a bit extra, which was an unexpected joy. Simultaneously, it made Mr. Carter immediately realize Zod's value. Zod accepted the gold coins as a matter of course. The money came just at the right time, and it was enough to cover the startup capital. Filming a long magic film required various things besides manpower. Although Mr. Carter might be able to provide them, it was better to maintain control himself. Around Zod, those kin had widened their eyes. That, the black hole, could actually be used to make money. And it was 13 gold coins at once. One had to know that the annual expenses for a family in this world were only about 2 gold coins. But as long as one made something that moved the nobles, they could be this generous. In that case, didn't that mean they could find a way to buy a batch of pure blood plasma? Zod didn't know the thoughts of his kin. After weighing the money pouch twice, he looked back at Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter, you didn't come all this way just to deliver money, did you? That's right. I came personally because I wanted to ask if you have created a second work like The Black Hole. No, there won't be any sequel to The Black Hole. Mr. Carter widened his eyes. Ah. So that person is just stuck in the safe and can never come out. Zod nodded. That's right. This is a story without an ending. Writing an ending for such a story would make it less of a good story, so I won't give The Black Hole a sequel. But you said before that there was more than one idea besides the black hole. Zod nodded and said, of course, there is more than one idea. Before you came, I had already planned the second work, and you gave me this money, which just happened to accelerate my plan. Oh, what kind of work is it? Mr. Carter's eyes lit up, and what he didn't realize was that he seemed a bit impatient, very eager to know what the next work was like. The last short film was just an experiment to see if it was popular. Now that it's confirmed, I intend to produce a very long magic film, one so long that it makes anyone watching forget the time. Show me quickly. Mr. Carter said hastily, but immediately realized he had lost his composure, so he quickly adjusted his mood and said, ahem, I mean, could you let me see what the content is like? I don't mind letting you read the script, but honestly, if you read it and then watch the official magic film, you will likely lose a lot of the fun. Do you still want to see it? Hearing Zod's words, Mr. Carter hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He didn't know why, but that urge to see the story just wouldn't stop. Fine. It's a good opportunity for you to give me some feedback. Zod handed a portion of the Sherlock Holmes script he had just finished writing to Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter immediately took it with both hands very seriously, as if facing something sacred, and then began to read it eagerly. Zod looked back at his kin. All right, let's let Mr. Carter read the script while we select a qualified lead actor. He looked at the kin before him, scanning them simply. In Sherlock Holmes, the protagonist Sherlock Holmes has a personality full of oddities, aloof and shrewd, and the plot even includes scenes where he occasionally fears sunlight. If such a protagonist were a vampire, it wouldn't seem out of place. Of course, Zod didn't want to create a purely righteous and glorious vampire. If people in this world saw such an image, their first reaction would definitely be, how could there be such a vampire? Therefore, the character must have a sufficiently complex personality. Cannot be like a monster. Cannot be like a good person. Cannot be like an ordinary noble. Needs to be dangerous, intelligent, acerbic, and useful. It is best to let the audience judge for themselves whether it is good or bad. However, Zod scanned them, and the performances of these kin were either truly like villains or like righteous gentlemen. There wasn't a single one who could display complex emotions. It seems that selecting a qualified lead is not an easy task. Forget it, let them perform one by one, and then see if there might be a suitable candidate. Alright, the first one, come over here and perform the traits of the character I just gave you. Remember, try your best to restore the personality of Sherlock Holmes himself. Your performance is too forced. Sherlock Holmes should be a sharp guy. You act like someone who discovered the mechanism without any prior perception, like a deus ex machina. Next. It's super convenient. In an open area inside the hall, a vampire was standing by a chair in a comical pose, with an evil expression, looking as if he had just discovered a delicious human. Upon hearing Zod's voice, he was momentarily stunned, then looked somewhat innocent. Grand Duke, didn't you say he was eccentric and also a bit wicked? Eccentric and wicked, yes, but not stupid. Your comprehension is still lacking, but that's okay. You can go play the dim-witted police officer. Alright, next. The vampire scratched his head, still not understanding what kind of Sherlock Holmes the Grand Duke really wanted. This was an audition, and the content of the audition was to perform a scene where Sherlock Holmes finds a mechanism on the wall through subtle clues, enters a hidden room, and secretly steals some evidence without anyone noticing. This plot segment is a solo performance for the protagonist of Sherlock Holmes, which perfectly demonstrates Sherlock Holmes's own sharpness, intelligence, and extremely strong ability to act and judge. But at the same time, sneaking away with evidence to investigate on his own also reflects a bit of wickedness. However, what made Zod somewhat disappointed was that, up until now, there hadn't been a single Sherlock Holmes that matched his imagination. It was also possible that Zod's requirements were a bit too high. The lead actor of the original film, Robert Downey Jr., was an experienced actor with decades of experience, so naturally, he could portray the required character vividly and masterfully. But in this world, finding qualified actors was already difficult, let alone finding one who could portray the character vividly. However, it wasn't impossible. Film acting is divided into many schools of thought, such as the experiential school, the representational school, and method acting. And there is another type, the natural school. This school of acting is born as a template for a certain character, it doesn't need much polishing to perform the essence of that type of person. Like Marilyn Monroe, who was born to be the template for the American sweetheart. Robert Downey Jr. can also be considered a natural actor. Most of the characters he played after becoming famous carried a bit of flamboyance and frivolity. And Brad Pitt, who is very suitable for playing roles like playboys and ruffians. So, as long as he could find someone who fit this mold, it would be enough. But just at this moment, Zod suddenly noticed a vampire in the corner. Zod had an impression of him. He was a Klansman who had just recovered not long ago. Unlike the other Klansmen, this guy seemed to resist standing in a conspicuous position, constantly looking around sneakily, as if ensuring he wouldn't be discovered by anyone. Your name is Vic, right? Come here for a moment. Zod beckoned to that Klansman and said. Vic, who was hiding in the corner, suddenly heard his name being called. He immediately straightened his body, then looked at Zod, appearing somewhat cautious. Grand Duke, did you call me? Yes, that's you. Come and perform as Sherlock Holmes. But I'm not very good at acting. In the past, I once tried using deception to get some money or plasma, and then I got beaten up. Vic shrank his neck, as if he had already recalled all the unpleasant things from before. Here, you don't need to worry about anyone hitting you. I just want you to perform as Sherlock Holmes. Just treat this character as yourself. By the way, have you read the information on this character? Vic nodded. I have read it, Grand Duke, but I'm really not sure if I can perform it well. Zod said with an encouraging tone. Just perform naturally, give it a try. Hearing Zode's encouragement, refusing again seemed a bit disrespectful to the Grand Duke. Thinking of this, Vic finally gathered his courage. Under the gaze of the other vampire clansmen, he came to the open audition area and sat on the chair placed in the center. The scene being performed was sitting casually and frivolously on a chair, and then inadvertently noticing through the dust that there seemed to be wind behind the wall, so after trying, he opened a secret door. Vic had indeed memorized the entire plot of the character just now. It wasn't that he was very eager to audition, he just thought this character was very interesting. It seemed, it was actually a bit like him. Unable to help himself, as he sat on the seat, he actually began to subconsciously immerse himself into the character. He felt as if he were that Sherlock Holmes who looked somewhat sharp and clever. He first struck a nonchalant pose, then looked around at the surrounding environment, then pretended he had picked up something, fiddled with it briefly, and then was startled, as if the thing he was fiddling with had suddenly burst or something similar. But immediately after, Vic looked toward one side following the gaze from his moment of being startled, narrowed his eyes, and kept imagining in his mind that this was a wall. At this moment, his eyes darted around, then he looked left and right as if no one else was there, stood up from the seat, felt around in front of him, and finally, as if he had discovered a mechanism, his eyes widened slightly. Click. Vic suddenly opened his mouth, subconsciously cooperating with his own performance, and uttered an onomatopoeic syllable, as if a mechanism were really operating. Then he walked forward and arrived at a new area. Vic's performance also temporarily ended at this moment, and then he turned his head back to look at Zode. He asked cautiously, Grand Duke, is this okay? Zode was somewhat speechless at this moment. Just speaking of this performance, he could probably still find quite a few flaws. But just speaking of the atmosphere and state of the performance, especially since this guy Vic even learned to use onomatopoeia to pretend he opened the mechanism, it was very clear that Vic had already immersed himself into the state of this character. This was exactly the state Zode wanted most. That's it. Zode said almost without thinking. There were definitely flaws, but the merits outweighed the defects. Very good, Vic. You are the choice for the protagonist, Sherlock Holmes. Zode's mood immediately became better as well. At least he had found a suitable actor, so he wouldn't have to figure out how to teach someone from scratch how to play Sherlock Holmes well. This saved a lot of effort all at once. Vic was a bit stunned. He was selected just like that. But he felt like he hadn't done anything at all. He just pretended that Sherlock Holmes was himself. And performing as himself, wasn't that something easy to do? It's just that this Sherlock Holmes wasn't like him, failing to deceive people and getting beaten up in the end. But looking at Zode's determined gaze, Vic seemed to realize that his performance just now had indeed moved the Grand Duke. This was something he dared not imagine in the past. To think that one day he would actually receive appreciation from the Grand Duke. Even though he was just a very inconspicuous vampire clansman. With the male lead, Sherlock Holmes, sorted, the next step was the second male lead, Watson. In Zode's plan, Sherlock Holmes's identity was a vampire detective, so Watson should be a human. This was a necessary step. The coexistence of humans and vampires, working together, and then fighting against enemies, this inherently possessed a certain dramatic conflict. Differences in their values and views on life could also generate some dramatic conflict. However, finding a real human actor probably wouldn't work right now, so it would be better to find a vampire to play the human. However, after searching for quite a while, Zode had not yet selected a qualified second male lead, Watson. Zode couldn't say exactly why he couldn't choose one, he just felt that their performances were always lacking a little something. Perhaps it was because of their vampire identity, it seemed very difficult for them to fully immerse themselves in a human state at all times. Zode had no choice but to put this matter on hold for now. Casting could be set aside. There was another thing he could do immediately, which was purchasing supplies and choosing filming locations. Mr. Carter, I'm afraid I'll need to trouble you next. Zode turned his head to look at Mr. Carter's position, only to see Mr. Carter intently reading the preliminary script for Sherlock Holmes that Zode had given him. The content of this script began with Sherlock Holmes using his keen intellect and combat prowess to destroy a sacrificial ritual led by the mysterious cult leader Blackwood and bringing him to justice. However, although this cult leader Blackwood was captured, even in a prison where magic was restricted, Blackwood had used some unknown evil means to influence the people and objects around him, which was extremely eerie and sinister. But no matter how sinister it was, Blackwood still faced his execution ceremony. Yet, just as the execution was being carried out, Blackwood showed no fear at all. instead saying in a tone that made people shudder, "Death is only a beginning." Immediately following the execution, not long after, the coffin burying Blackwood suddenly burst open, and Blackwood's corpse vanished into thin air. The entire city was instantly shrouded in a shadow of fear. The content of the script ended right there, coming to an abrupt halt. And Mr. Carter had read this part of the script a full 3 or 4 times. Even when Zode called out to him, Mr. Carter appeared indifferent. Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter. Ah. Mr. Carter was startled, then came to his senses. Mr. Zode, is something the matter? How is the script? Have you finished reading it? Mr. Carter nodded, still looking unsatisfied. I've finished it. This is truly a good story, just like Black Hole, but it's also a story without an ending, which is a bit of a pity. Zode shook his head. No, no, no. This script doesn't lack an ending, it has a proper ending, but I just haven't finished writing it yet. What? This story has an ending? Mr. Carter was suddenly pleasantly surprised, but immediately realized he seemed to have lost his composure a bit. He didn't know why he would lose his composure like that. Then, suppressing his eagerness, he asked, I would like to know what the specific ending is. As for that, wait until I finish writing it. As for now, I need your help, Mr. Carter. If I help you, will you give me the rest of the script? Mr. Carter suddenly asked again. Depends on the situation. Mr. Carter immediately became full of energy and said, leave it to me, Mr. Zode. Tell me what you need help with. Do you remember what I needed to do when I created Black Hole? Mr. Carter pondered for a moment, then said, I remember you asked me for filming equipment, a room, as well as a safe and some mechanical devices. Zode nodded. That's right. This time I want to film a feature-length magic film, and the things I need will be several times more than for Black Hole. As a factory owner, you should know where I can buy the things I want, right? As Zode spoke, he picked up the paper and pen on the side and said, First of all, there will be many filming devices this time, I can't just use one. There will also be quite a few recording crystals for recording. Of course, I will pay for them. Soon, a list of various supplies Zode needed was written on the paper. Mr. Carter took it and looked at the contents on the paper. 5 filming devices, high-brightness magic glow lamps, custom prop boards, and a series of other things. It even required horse-drawn carriages. And at the very end, there were filming locations that needed to be rented. These included a dockyard, as well as some residential houses and so on. So many things. Mr. Carter was a bit dazed, he really hadn't expected that filming a magic film would require so much content. Believe me, these are all necessary, and I have even reduced these things as much as possible. For some locations like markets, Zode felt that if he filmed directly on the streets, it might attract some unnecessary trouble. So he could only build them himself in some open spaces. That would require making some background boards for the scenes, and with the help of some magic illusions, it should be enough to pass as realistic. These things can indeed be handled, but your money might all be spent, and it might not even be enough. Zode nodded. I know that, but I also have some alternative methods. It's fine to first find a way to handle the filming equipment and location rentals. Mr. Carter hesitated for a moment, then tentatively asked, Mr. Zode, if all these things are gathered, will this, Sherlock Holmes, look even better? That goes without saying. The more realistic the scene, the easier it is to be immersed. Then, Mr. Zode, if it's possible, I would like to invest a sum in you. A light flashed in Mr. Carter's eyes. He definitely wasn't saying he wanted to invest because he wanted to see the later plot of the script. He was just imagining the kind of immersive feeling that would be even greater than Black Hole after this magic film was filmed. That experience should be superb. And for that superb experience, Mr. Carter felt that even if he lost money doing it, it seemed acceptable. As a factory owner, he still had some savings, more or less. I would be very happy if you were willing to invest, Mr. Carter, but are you sure? I am sure, Mr. Carter said firmly. Zode smiled. Then, I will leave these matters to you, Mr. Carter. As for me, I will figure out a way to train a second male lead, Watson, actor. Watson actor. I remember the script said this seems to be a human. Which human actor do you want to find to play him, Mr. Zode? Zode shrugged. As of now, I'm afraid I can't find a suitable human actor, so I have no choice but to find a way to use one of my kin to play the human Watson. How can that be? Mr. Carter blurted out, not realizing he seemed to have lost his composure again. Mr. Zode, you have said it yourself. Only realistic filming can provide a more realistic viewing experience, so the second male lead, Watson, must be a human. But I'm afraid I have no channels to find a suitable Watson actor. Bang, bang, bang. Mr. Carter patted his chest. Mr. Zode, you still have me. We are partners now, I will help you find a Watson actor too. Regarding the matter of finding a second male lead, Mr. Carter seemed to take it quite seriously. After giving his assurance to Zode, he returned home that same day, but immediately left again without delay, heading straight for the Ruby Theater. As soon as he entered, the theater owner, Ram, saw Mr. Carter and took the initiative to walk over and greet him, a stark contrast to how Mr. Carter used to have to seek Ram out himself. Mr. Carter, you've arrived. Welcome, welcome. Do you have any more of those recording crystals? Ram didn't waste any time, getting straight to the point to ask Mr. Carter for more recording crystals. Ever since the black hole became popular, those nobles had begun their usual habit of one-upping each other. One would buy 10 recording crystals outright, while another would buy 20. This was something Zode hadn't anticipated, he had somewhat underestimated the vanity of the nobles in this world. Therefore, Mr. Carter's, the black hole, recording crystals sold extremely quickly. The remaining pre-ordered recording crystals were already being bought by even more nobles at inflated prices. Naturally, Ram was able to take a considerable cut from this, and his attitude toward Mr. Carter was better than ever before. Facing Ram's persistent questioning, Mr. Carter waved his hand dismissively and said with a feigned air of mystery, "We are already producing the recording crystals, and as soon as they are ready, I will have them delivered to you." Ram nodded excitedly, then asked with a hint of caution, Mr. Carter, I'd like to ask one thing. Have any other theaters approached you to purchase the black hole recording crystals today? Other theaters. Mr. Carter was taken aback, but he quickly realized what was going on. It seemed Ram was worried that a good business opportunity might be snatched away by his competitors. On the very day the black hole became a hit in noble circles, other theaters had learned the news immediately and should have already started looking for ways to find the creator of the black hole. However, because Mr. Carter was currently dealing exclusively with Ram, they hadn't reached him yet. But that didn't stop him from telling a little lie to Ram. Other theaters have already contacted me and all expressed interest in my recording crystals. Then, what kind of cut are they willing to offer? I can lower mine a bit. Ram began to get anxious. Mr. Carter placed a hand on the other man's shoulder and said, "We can discuss the cut later. I have another matter to attend to here. I'll just ask you one question. Do you want another recording crystal that is just as interesting as the black hole?" "You mean the story after the black hole?" Ram's eyes twinkled. Leaving aside how much money he would make, he himself was very eager to know the sequel to the black hole, whether that man had ever gotten out or not. But unfortunately, there was no more. No, it's not a sequel to the black hole, but a brand new story, and it's even more interesting than the black hole. Mr. Carter laid out the vision Zode had described to him once again, and he found that Ram seemed to take the bait easily, without even a hint of resistance. A more captivating story, think of how much money that will make. Ram looked somewhat fanatical. By the way, tell me what this new story is about. This fanaticism was also partly driven by a desire for the new story. The new story. I advise you not to read it. Otherwise, when the magic film is screened, your enjoyment will be greatly diminished. After reading the script, Mr. Carter finally understood the meaning of Zode's words. He still regretted reading the script a little bit now. But at the same time, he was somewhat eager for Zode to provide the script for the subsequent plot, and his inner feelings were very complicated. Ram, on the other hand, nodded in agreement and said, "That makes sense. Then I'll hold off and not ask about this story for now. But you came to talk to me about this, or you looking to discuss a new collaboration? You could say that. It's also because of our relationship. But at the same time, I also need you to do me a favor. I need you to help me find an actor. An actor. Of course. Are you looking for a man or a woman? But I'll say this up front. My actresses don't do anything else, they only perform. If you are looking for someone to serve you, I can introduce you to someone else." "What kind of nonsense are you spouting? I am a decent person." Mr. Carter coughed violently, masking his inner embarrassment. "I want a male actor. I need this person to participate in the performance of the next story." "Oh, that's absolutely no problem. What kind of actor are you looking for? Middle-aged or younger? It would be best if he is good at playing someone who knows how to fight well." Mr. Carter recalled the character information for Watson that he had seen in the script. A battlefield doctor who had been to war, perhaps a mage skilled in healing magic, while also retaining some special combat abilities as a battlefield medic. Gray might work. That guy has always been good at playing knights who fight dragons. It would be best if he also knows a bit of healing magic. Then Gray won't do. How about Lucas? His family used to run a magic potion shop, but they were driven to bankruptcy by new types of compound potions, which is why he came to be an actor. Mr. Carter's eyes lit up. That's the one. What kind of roles has he played before? He's played some knights, squires, and the like. That's simply perfect. Is he here right now? I want to see him immediately. Of course, he's in the back preparing for today's stage play. In the dressing room, Lucas was putting on a simple attendant's costume. He looked unremarkable, but his physique was robust and energetic. He was currently preparing for today's performance in the dressing room. Suddenly, the door to the dressing room was pushed open, and Ram led Mr. Carter inside. Lucas, I'm here, boss. Lucas hurriedly stood up and took the initiative to approach Ram and the other man. After his family's potion shop went bankrupt, Ram had taken him in as an actor. Otherwise, his family might not have even been able to make a basic living. Therefore, he respected the theater owner, Ram, more than anyone else, and he had never refused any request Ram made of him. Lucas, your big break has arrived. There is a new acting job that needs your cooperation. As Ram spoke to Lucas, he looked toward Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Lucas. I don't know if he meets your requirements, but rest assured, his acting skills are quite good, and he has many years of performance experience. Mr. Carter scrutinized the Lucas before him. In his mind, the image of Watson from the script faintly intersected and overlapped with the man, and then he nodded subconsciously. He looks a bit like him. Lucas noticed Mr. Carter beside Ram and began to size him up as well, feeling a bit confused. He looked like Boss Ram's friend. Did the boss mean that he was to perform a stage play for this gentleman? Mr. Carter spoke up at this moment. Mr. Lucas, I have an opportunity here. It's a job for a performance outside. Lucas nodded slightly, already prepared for this. If Boss Ram agrees, I have no objections. Mr. Carter said. That's fine. But besides that, I have one more thing I need to tell you in advance. You might have to perform with a vampire. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and support our channel for more stories. Hello everyone, this is Fanfic Audiobook. Here you find original fan-made audio stories.
Vampires don't drink blood. What kind of cultural invasion is this? Part 2. You mean to say, this black hole was created by a vampire? Inside the theater lobby, Lucas watched the Black Hole short film again, continuing to look at Mr. Carter with suspicion. He found it truly hard to believe what Mr. Carter had just said. In his impression, vampires were mysterious, terrifying, and filled with menace. Many historical texts recorded how cruel vampires once were. They would drain the blood of innocent people just to survive. But here was Mr. Carter, claiming they were the creators of Black Hole. Since when did vampires possess such unique creativity? That's right, this was created by a vampire. Honestly, I didn't believe it at first either, but after I read the second story for a magic film that he wrote, I believed it. Mr. Carter answered very seriously, while internally wondering if bringing the second male lead back would allow him to see the rest of the script sooner. As for other items Zod needed, such as the venue and filming props, he had already let his butler handle them, so it didn't require much of his own time. Only the task of finding a qualified actor required him to pay more attention. He had also seen Sherlock Holmes, so he had a rough impression of what the characters should look like. He didn't want a terrible actor to ruin this magic film. If that's the case, I'm willing to give it a try, but won't this be some kind of trap? I've heard that vampires love to hunt humans for blood. Mr. Carter said nonchalantly. That's in the past. Vampires today wouldn't dare do such things, so I don't think you need to worry too much about safety. As a factory owner and minor noble with a higher status, he knew more about the inside workings of groups like the Church and the Vampire Hunter Association than these people at the bottom, and he knew more about the ancient history of vampires. In the distant past, vampires rarely hunted humans for blood without reason. Because back then, People would even voluntarily offer their own blood to vampires for the sake of survival. In the era when vampires ruled, it wasn't much different from the current rule of the church and other forces. Understanding this, Mr. Carter dared to interact with this poorly reputed race. Otherwise, with his cautious personality, he certainly wouldn't do anything risky. Then Mr. Carter, I've found a very good actor for you. As for the screening of this new magic film, don't worry, Ram, I will definitely let you screen this new story first, but you know, if someone else is willing to pay a high price, I can't refuse, right? That's enough. Ram wasn't greedy. Being able to let his theater screen that new magic film first was already enough to attract nobles to visit immediately. He had been worrying about how it was becoming harder to make money lately. Lucas said, Mr. Carter, when should I go to perform? Let's go now. I think my butler should have handled things over there. In Grand City, inside a long-abandoned factory, Zod and a group of vampires had already arrived. Mr. Zod, the owner of this factory, is an old friend of Mr. Carter. Since it's currently abandoned, he's willing to rent it to us cheaply. May I ask if this space is enough? Zod looked around, making an estimate in his mind. The entire site covered an area of about 200 acres, occupied by 3 or 4 factory buildings of various sizes. Zod nodded. It's enough. It's certainly enough for filming a magic film. So, how much rent does this old friend of Mr. Carter want? Mr. Carter's butler shook his head and said, no need. Mr. Carter said he would fund this. Then thank Mr. Carter for me. Zod said casually, then turned his gaze back to the abandoned factory. Setting up the filming site would require quite a bit of work. But for vampires, this didn't seem to be a problem. Vampires were naturally physically strong. Moving heavy objects and performing various construction tasks wasn't difficult. In Zod's words, the vampires of this world were simply born with a construction worker's physique. But the vampires in this world were too proud. They were so poor they couldn't even afford a sip of blood, and when pushed to the edge, they would only think of hunting rather than doing some manual labor to earn money. However, having said that, according to the tone of this world, this trait of vampires might actually bring trouble upon themselves. Being physically stronger than normal people and doing more work than others meant they were natural grinders. By then, their coworkers would probably all be enemies, the kind who would love to hack the vampires to pieces. Zod, who knew a little about the Victorian industrial era, was well aware of how nasty scabs and the like could be back then. So, it was no wonder these vampires didn't want to go out and work for others. Working for others was impossible, but if they worked for themselves, and especially working for him, the leader of the vampires, that went without saying. Zod clapped his hands and said to everyone, all right everyone, next we have a relatively important matter to prioritize, renovating these factory buildings, first making this place suitable as a filming site. After speaking, Zod took out the design blueprints he had prepared long ago from the side. As a deceased game designer in his past life, before entering the industry, he had worked in civil engineering, so he was definitely an expert at creating construction blueprints. Relying on the strong physique and energy of the Grand Duke of Blood, Zod managed to produce several construction blueprints for the filming site in just one night. But they were just for show. As long as the scenes within the camera's range looked real, it was fine. The parts outside that range were not within consideration. Of course, there would be situations where they would go out to film, such as some carriage chase scenes, etc. In short, this team had been assembled, and now it was time to work hard on construction. Oh no, work hard on filming. Looking at the blueprints, these vampire clansmen were confused. But this was a task from their Grand Duke of Blood, so they had no reason to refuse. Fighting for the Grand Duke of Blood and striving for the continuation of the vampire race was the ultimate mission of these few remaining vampires. Thus, from the perspective of Mr. Carter's butler, this group of vampires, who had been a bit sickly just moments ago, looked as if they had really been injected with blood. One by one, they were full of energy, picking up shovels and various construction materials the butler had purchased and starting to work. In the eyes of these vampires, what Zod was doing now was for the continuation and survival of the race, so there was even less reason to refuse. When Mr. Carter arrived with the actor Lucas, looking at the group of vampires busily building, he almost thought he had come to the wrong place. Where on earth have I been brought to? Carter felt a bit dazed. If he hadn't seen Zod himself, he would have truly thought he had come to the wrong place. These vampires were a bit too capable. Especially after being blessed by Zod's power of worship, the efficiency of these vampires seemed to have skyrocketed. This was something even Zod hadn't expected. Apparently, the potential of the vampire race had never been tapped into in the past. Zod suddenly started to look forward to what these vampires could become under his guidance. Anyway, now that he had the identity of the Grand Duke of Blood, these vampires naturally had no choice but to rely on him. Through the memories of the body's original owner, Zod also learned that the power of worship of the vampire race could only be absorbed by the clan leader. No matter who released worship towards the vampires, it would eventually flow into the current clan leader. It was like a hive mind binding effect. Once the leader absorbed the power of worship, they would then distribute it to their subordinates, strengthening them. Therefore, Zod naturally possessed absolute authority among the vampires. Mr. Carter, you've arrived. Thank you for providing the venue and various resources. Now, this, Sherlock Holmes, magic film project can be considered officially launched. Zod walked over after seeing Carter, wearing a friendly smile. In all respects, Carter could be considered a quite qualified partner. He provided resources and a venue, and was even willing to invest. Although it was also because he saw Zod's potential, being willing to take a risk and gamble on it still required a lot of courage. Of course, this also had to do with the fact that Zod had conducted an investigation before approaching Carter. First, he confirmed that Carter's factory did not have behaviors like maliciously withholding workers' wages or abusing workers, and only then did Zod consider approaching Carter directly. For such a partner, Zod was also willing to give equal respect. This is all part of the investment. Of course, once Sherlock Holmes is filmed, your share of the revenue won't be lacking, that's for sure. Carter responded casually, then immediately asked impatiently, "So, Mr. Zod, how much of the script did you write today? Is the subsequent content finished? I'm writing it. Please don't be impatient, good stories are worth the wait." Carter held back, then feigned ease and said, "All right then. But I didn't come here to ask for the rest of the script. I came to introduce an actor to you, a human actor. I think he might be suitable to play the role of Watson." Zod shifted his gaze from Carter and looked at Lucas beside him. He was about 1.8 meters tall, a middle-aged man with a hint of vicissitudes in his eyes. It seemed not bad. "Hello. Zod, right. My name is Lucas. I was invited by Mr. Carter to try out for the new magic film performance." Lucas was also sizing up Zod at the same time, as well as those madmen behind Zod. No, they should be vampires. But these vampires were currently looking disheveled, working extremely hard, one might even say as if they were risking their lives. This was worlds apart from the dangerous and terrifying vampires in his impression. If it weren't for the fact that the scene looked too bizarre, he really wouldn't have felt there was any problem. "Lucas, right. Welcome to the team. Without further ado, how about we conduct an audition now?" "Audition? It's an interview. I want to see your acting ability." Lucas nodded. "Of course. But I would like to know, what kind of role exactly am I supposed to play? On the way here, I only heard from Mr. Carter that this character is a retired battlefield military doctor." "Correct, but that is just his background. First, take a look at this script, and then I will bring the lead actor to perform a scene with you." The lead actor. Lucas was taken aback, he had thought he would be the lead actor. So, based on that, the lead actor must be a vampire, right? This seemed very special. Lucas pondered. He really had never acted with a vampire before. There weren't many people in this world who acted with vampires. But it was also just right, it would allow him to understand this race better. "Mr. Zod, is this the new script?" Seeing the script Zod handed to Lucas, Carter was obviously more anxious than Lucas. "No, it's just the previous dialogue script." Carter was immediately a bit disappointed. Lucas took the script with one hand and began to flip through it. He had seen many scripts, so there were no major obstacles to reading it, but as he read on, he couldn't help but become immersed in it. To ensure people in this world could understand the story in the script, Zod had directly adopted a script format similar to describing a story. Simply put, it was about the same as reading a normal novel. Therefore, as long as it was adapted, it seemed there wouldn't be any problem with publishing it as a book directly. Oh, right, publishing books also seemed like a new path to obtain the power of worship. Releasing a Sherlock Holmes novel directly also seemed quite good. By the way, he could also write things like Agatha Christie's Mysteries or Detective Poirot. These were all things Zod had read when he was most obsessed with mystery stories. To this day, he still remembered them vividly, and had even fantasized about becoming a famous detective when he grew up. But reality. It was fortunate enough that he didn't end up as a construction worker in the end. While Lucas was reading the script, Zod took the opportunity to briefly introduce his upcoming plans to Carter. First, build the film studio inside the factory building. Some indoor scenes would be handled directly in these studios. Then the outdoor scenes could also be filmed within the factory area. Only those that required bustling streets and other outdoor locations would have to be filmed outside. This would require someone to coordinate. Carter was obviously this qualified coordinator. Carter did not refuse at all and agreed readily. But it wasn't without a price. Zod promised that he would write the next segment of the script tonight. As they chatted, Lucas finally finished reading the script. After finishing it, he seemed to be a bit dazed, as if he couldn't distinguish reality for a moment. Zod immediately saw that this Lucas seemed to have already immersed himself into the role of Watson. The script included a character biography for Watson, which made it easy for readers and actors like Lucas to understand quickly. This was a pretty good actor. Being able to get into character so quickly. Zod nodded quietly. This was also quite a rare thing in this world. It seems you've finished reading. How do you feel? Hearing Zod's question, Lucas slowly recovered from his dazed state and looked at Zod. Mr. Zod, no, you are the Grand Duke of the Vampires, right? Perhaps I should call you Grand Duke Zod. From Lucas's perspective, the story in his hand was one he had never experienced before. Just for this point alone, it was worth it for Lucas to take Zod seriously. The audition you mentioned earlier, can I do it now? I have confidence that I can play this role well. Hello, my name is Vic. In front of Lucas, the vampire Vic greeted him generously. Lucas looked at Vic and found that, apart from a very pale complexion, he didn't seem much different from a normal human. Oh no, these vampires were all quite handsome and beautiful on average. Vic was already one of the more plain-looking ones among these vampires. This was exactly the effect Zod wanted. Hello, I am Lucas. It looks like we will be working together on a performance. I hope we have a pleasant collaboration. Lucas took the initiative to extend his hand, showing goodwill. Vic, on the other hand, appeared somewhat reserved. The last time he had close contact with other races could likely be traced back over a decade ago. Vampires were indeed too insular in this regard. Vic took the initiative to ask, then you know the plot of the performance, right? Lucas nodded. He had already seen the scene that needed to be auditioned in the script earlier. The scene was shortly after the beginning of the story, where the second male lead, Watson, was hosting a distinguished guest in the house they shared, and then Sherlock Holmes upstairs began messing with some strange contraptions, drawing the guest's annoyance. Next was the scene between Watson and Sherlock Holmes. The dialogue in this segment was very dense and required conveying many of the characters' traits. Honestly, this didn't look any easier than a stage play. Soon, a temporary house set had been built using some simple background boards, with the rest relying entirely on the two's imagination. From Watson entering the dim upstairs, then pulling open the curtains, causing Sherlock Holmes to wail, it all required imagination. The two quickly came to the center of the venue and indicated they were ready. All right, start. And following Zod's command, the two quickly entered their state. At the same time, the vampires working frantically not far away stopped their work, and Mr. Carter was also watching intently from the side. The vampire clansmen hadn't really seen a performed magic film yet, and they had seen very few stage plays, which made them very curious about what kind of thing could generate the power of worship. Watson, I have invented a device that can hide the magical light and magical flow when releasing magic, achieving it without anyone knowing. Don't pull the curtains, Watson. Clatter. Ow. Clatter. Ow. Inside the fictional house, Lucas looked calm, appearing to have completely entered the role, portraying that retired military doctor. At the same time, the two began to interact. Sherlock Holmes, I feel you should go out and find a new case. I agree, but I can't find a case that can get me excited. Aren't there many in the newspaper? Look, Mrs. Rancy from Queen's Park, her husband is missing. He is in Belgium with her maid, you know, eh. Is it November now? That's right. Watson looked helpless, then continued. Lady Rediff reported her emerald bracelet missing. That's an insurance scammer. Sir Rediff is lecherous and a gambler. Oh, are you the examining doctor after Blackwood's hanging? Yes, that was our last case together. I wanted to see it through to the end. The last one. Cut. Zode's voice suddenly rang out, interrupting their next actions. Mr. Zode, what is a cut? Oh, you might not understand. Cut means we need to pause for a moment. I will shout this often in the future, and you need to get used to it. Zode explained, then walked over to the two who were immersed in their performance. Mr. Carter was also taken aback at this moment. He felt the performance was very good. And watching the two perform from such a close distance, it really felt like being there in person. Wasn't that enough? He thought even the best stage play performers couldn't be better than this, right? It was indeed worthy of being an excellent story, excellent enough to make the actors involuntarily immerse themselves in it, and involuntarily perform it well. But Zode was not very satisfied. Mr. Lucas, you performed well, but, if I have to say, it's a bit too stiff and formal. Lucas was a bit confused, and just as he wanted to ask, Zode spoke again. I know stage performances usually require acting that is as exaggerated as possible so that people sitting in the back row can hear your dialogue and can understand your actions just through body movements, but, a magic film does not need those cumbersome things. Zode had never imagined that one day he would teach others how to act. When watching behind-the-scenes footage of movies and the like, he could always see the director sitting in the actor's position, pretending to be that actor, setting an example first, and then letting the other person repeat the performance. And now, Zode was doing just that. Come, look at me. Suppose I am Watson now, Vic, you come and perform with me. Perhaps it was the innate instinct of a vampire, although Zode wasn't very good at acting in his previous life, he seemed to be handling it with ease at this moment. In just a few seconds, Zode had completely entered the state of Watson. Just now, Lucas's body posture was very exaggerated, and the range of his movements was very large, but when it came to Zode, all the movements looked very subtle. You can watch from up close, you can even watch right against my face, because when actually filming, it's very likely that some shots will be close-ups of the face. Come, look at me up close. Ah, oh. Lucas nodded subconsciously, then obediently walked to Zode's side, watching Zode intently. Mr. Carter followed suit, also trying to observe from a close distance. He also wanted to experience that closer immersion. This action made Vic feel a bit uncomfortable, but because Zode was right there, it didn't seem appropriate for him to show any dissatisfaction, so he just had to endure it and interact with Zode. As for Zode, he seemed like it was nothing, and he didn't seem to care at all about these people observing him from such close range, even if they could see his pores clearly. Zode held a few blank sheets of paper in his hand, and it seemed as if something was really recorded on them. He spoke slowly and methodically. Lady Rediff reported her emerald bracelet missing. That's an insurance scammer. Sir Rediff is lecherous and a gambler. Oh, are you the examining doctor after Blackwood's hanging? At this moment, Zode stopped mid-sentence, while his eyes seemed to dodge slightly, and his speech became hesitant. Yes, that was our last case together. I wanted to see it through to the end. The last one. How was it? Zode returned to his normal appearance in a second and looked at Lucas and Mr. Carter. Mr. Zode, you are amazing. How did you do that? You seemed to be Watson just a moment ago, and now you are back to being Mr. Zode. Before Lucas could say anything, Mr. Carter let out an exclamation first. He had also seen many stage play performances. There were many actors with strong acting abilities who were very immersed, but he had never seen this kind of seamless switching ability. Of course, this was also because stage plays didn't seem to require this ability usually. Zod, however, felt it was quite ordinary. Vampires themselves needed this skill in the past to fool believers and the like. Especially the original owner of Zod's body, this Grand Duke of Blood, was already an old hand at this. Plus the memories of Earth movies from his previous life. In fact, even Zod himself was a bit surprised and taken aback. Lucas also watched in a daze. Just now, he was observing every move Zod made from a very close distance. At the same time, he also took the opportunity to glance at Vic's reaction on the side. Everything seemed so natural. This kind of naturalness was indeed completely different from stage plays. Mr. Zod, I think I understand a little now. Lucas nodded, looking eager to try. Alright, then let's try again. Zod ceded his position back to Lucas. From what he saw just now, Lucas's acting foundation was definitely fine, he just lacked guidance. Zod actually originally wanted to just let vampires perform everything. This should have been the wisest choice. This would ensure the smoothness of the filming and performance. But Mr. Carter's words reminded Zod. If it was all performed by vampires, perhaps there would be some unpredictable consequences. If someone went to cause trouble afterward and discovered that it was all performed by vampires, and even the normal humans were played by vampires, it would very likely attract criticism from some people. Especially that bunch of church people, who might even characterize this magic film as a way for vampires to whitewash themselves. Therefore, human actors were still very necessary. And if possible, Zod also hoped to get more human extras. If more humans participated in the performance, then the rest would follow logically. Lucas and Vic performed again. And this time, the effect of their performance improved significantly. This further proved with facts that Lucas indeed had a very good acting foundation. Mr. Carter, you found me a good actor, thanks to you. Mr. Carter, however, stared intently at the performance and waved his hand, saying, "It's all a small matter, I also hope my investment can be perfect." Zod took the opportunity to say, "Then if possible, can you find some more human actors to be background props on the side? These actors don't necessarily need great acting skills, as long as they behave like normal people, that's fine." That's no problem, but is this necessary? Yes, very necessary. This is the foundation for making the magic film as realistic as possible. I see, then about how many such people do you need? Mr. Carter began to estimate in his heart how much money it would cost. Estimated, over 100 people. Cough, cough, how many? Mr. Carter thought he had misheard and finally looked back at Zod. Over 100 people, and this is on the premise that some people can be reused, otherwise, even more extras are needed. Over 100 extras in a movie was already considered a very common thing. In some top-tier movies, situations involving thousands or even tens of thousands of people occurred from time to time. Sometimes, even the military would provide help for the filming of a movie. In his previous life, the action superstar Jackie Chan went to a foreign country to film a movie, and the military of that country directly provided convenience, giving various help while appearing on camera. This also proved from the side that if one became an international superstar, the influence would also increase geometrically. Imagine if vampires had such a top superstar, their lives would probably be quite comfortable. Therefore, Zod's 100+ people was still considered conservative. The actors in those stories who could be named were already prepared to be handed over to other vampires, and the rest were extras with less demanding acting requirements. They don't necessarily have to be actors, they could also be ordinary people on the roadside. Anyway, I think if money is offered, they might all be willing to come and try. This. Mr. Carter frowned. He really hadn't expected that filming the magic film seemed much more troublesome than imagined. Wait, Mr. Zod, you just said ordinary people on the roadside are also okay. Didn't you say the magic film needs to be as realistic as possible? That's right. The most important responsibility of these extras is actually to perform as themselves. The best case is that these people are already workers, newsboys, thieves, tourists, and bandits, and so on. That would be best, as much as possible, just let them perform as themselves. Then, can the employees of my factory do it? Of course. Once he heard that he could hire ordinary people by paying money, why should the benefits go to outsiders? Why not just let his own people do it? Mr. Carter didn't mind giving the money to his own employees. Anyway, in the end, the fruits of their hard work would all flow back to him. Alright, then I can handle this. That's great. Zod smiled. Another troublesome matter solved. It felt quite satisfying to get the things that needed to be done sorted out one by one like this. At this time, the scene between Lucas and Vic had been performed. Zod immediately applauded. Both of you, very perfect. Mr. Lucas, you have passed the audition. From now on, you are Watson. Welcome to the team. Zod took the initiative to walk over and shook hands with Lucas, which counted as acknowledging the other's performance. Lucas was still a bit dazed, he hadn't yet come out of the character of Watson. Past stage plays required exaggerated body language and loud voices to convey information. When the performance ended, there was naturally no need to express like that, so it was easy to come out of the character. But what the magic film needed was a real reaction. How one speaks normally, how one expresses emotions and facial expressions normally, that's how one should act. This suddenly made it somewhat difficult to come out of the character. But Zod's seamless switching just now made Lucas admire him even more. And at this moment, Mr. Carter seemed to remember something and suddenly asked loudly, "By the way, Mr. Zod, didn't you say there was a script for the following parts that you could show me?" Sorry, it still needs to wait. I need to polish it well. Don't worry, a good story is never afraid of being late. Waiting a little longer can also let you see a more wonderful story. Zod responded without changing his expression, he seemed to be very good at such things. Anyway, if asked, it's in progress. Mr. Carter was just asking casually, he really didn't expect Zod to provide it immediately. If he really could provide it, he would even doubt the quality of the content. Good works need to be polished, don't they? Mr. Carter understood this sort of thing quite well. In the theater, every brand new stage play requires the creative team to spend years compiling it, which is perfectly normal. Meanwhile, inside the Carter factory, construction work continued. At the same time, Lucas and Vic were constantly rehearsing their scenes, practicing how to perform more realistically. As for the main villain Blackwood in the first installment of Sherlock Holmes, Zod had found a suitable candidate, another vampire clansman named Padding. Whether in appearance or personality, this man carried a hint of gloomy temperament, making him very suitable for playing a villainous role. However, he didn't seem quite accustomed to acting yet, so Zod simply let him practice how to be a villain on his own. As for the rest of the vampires, they continued to build within the Carter factory with a clanging noise. During this period, Zod also discovered a new use for the power of worship. That is, by continuously transmitting diluted power of worship to his clansmen, he could maintain their ability to work for a long time. Coupled with the vampires' naturally robust physiques, they seemed completely unaffected even while working themselves to the bone. They were practically born to be beasts of burden. That was the only way Zod could describe them. A week passed quickly, and the construction work inside the factory gradually drew to a close. At this time, the influence of Black Hole seemed to be gradually waning, and Zod could clearly feel that the daily amount of power of worship he received was decreasing. To quantify it, assuming he could harvest about 10 units of power of worship daily before, now it was only around 5. In a few more days, the power of worship that could be harvested from Black Hole would likely reach its limit. Of course, there was another way, which was to release the short film, Black Hole, to the commoner class, which would allow him to harvest another large batch of power of worship. But if he did that, it would likely affect Mr. Carter's enthusiasm. Up until now, the reason he was so motivated was because the recording crystal was selling very well in aristocratic circles. Among the commoner class, there probably wouldn't be many people who could afford to buy it. However, Zod knew deep down that the real money came from the vast commoner population. The base of the masses was much more far-reaching than the influence of individual aristocrats, but it would take some time to make Mr. Carter realize and understand this. A week later, Mr. Carter returned to the factory again, bringing the over 100 extras that Zode needed. The way Mr. Carter brought the extras over was a bit unique. He used several cargo carriages to haul the 100-plus people over in one go. All right everyone, we have arrived. This is where you will be working for the next period of time. As for your work at the factory, you don't need to worry about it for now. You can return to work at any time, and here, you can earn an extra sum of money. On the carriages, a group of people in various tattered clothes climbed down. While looking bewildered, they also gazed at the factory with a hint of fear. Mr. Carter, you just said there are vampires here, right? Those vampires won't attack us, will they? Some of these people were street beggars, some were employees from the Carter factory, and others were newsboys, porters, coachmen, tavern errand runners, and so on. Mr. Carter had followed Zode's instructions to recruit extras from all walks of life, attracting them to participate with a reward of 30 copper coins per half-day plus a meal. For the bottom-tier masses like homeless beggars and newsboys who lived from meal to meal, this kind of work was a rare opportunity, so they joined almost without hesitation. But only once they were on the carriages did Mr. Carter tell them that the people they were to serve were a group of vampires. This group of people wanted to run away on the spot. But they were reluctant to give up those 30 copper coins, and it was only after Mr. Carter swore by the gods and repeatedly guaranteed it with his aristocratic status that they felt slightly at ease and decided to take a gamble. Of course, it was also because they hadn't heard of any instances of vampires hunting humans for blood in many years. Even though the church and the vampire hunters kept propagating the evil of vampires, it still didn't feel very real to them. I've said it many times on the way, these are my good friends. I can guarantee you that they absolutely will not drink your blood. Although Mr. Carter was curious why Zode and his kind didn't drink blood, seeing that the group of vampires were energetic even without drinking blood, they likely wouldn't force others to provide it. This was one of the reasons he felt at ease bringing these people to participate in the performance. If you still don't believe me, do you need me to swear by the name of the god of trade and contracts again? Mr. Carter was already a bit dissatisfied. This group of people was truly timid. If they were still this cowardly, it proved that they weren't cut out for this line of work, and they deserved to miss out on a good opportunity. Risk and opportunity coexist, and only then is it possible to obtain extraordinary gains. This was a golden rule. Then, we have no problem, my lord. These people shrank their necks, not daring to argue with Mr. Carter any further. Fortunately, Mr. Carter was one of the better-tempered aristocrats. Other nobles would likely have already kicked and beaten them for questioning him. All right, follow me inside. Mr. Carter huffed, then took the lead. Behind Mr. Carter, these people began to whisper to each other again. Hey, what do you think those vampires look like? Could they all be evil and terrifying? I heard they are all transformed from blood-sucking bats, maybe they still look like bats. Anyway, no matter what, they definitely don't look like good people. Then if things don't look right in a moment, shall we just run? Right, that's what I was thinking too. These people quietly made their decision. If any accident really happened, they wouldn't care about the aristocrats' face, their lives were the most important thing. However, as they gradually approached the largest factory building within the complex, bursts of noisy sounds became increasingly clear. Those sounds sounded like moving heavy objects, and there were also some sawing sounds. This made them immediately start imagining whether the vampires were moving corpses inside and sawing bones. Some timid ones already had cramps in their legs and were itching to run away right now. But when Mr. Carter pushed open the doors of the largest factory area, allowing these extras to see the scene inside, they were stunned. What met their eyes was not a bloody scene, but a cloud of raised dust. Amidst the dust, one could see figures carrying wooden stakes, pushing cargo wheelbarrows, and various construction materials, as well as large wooden boards painted with patterns. The more they looked, the more it actually resembled a construction site. The scene before them was something these ordinary people had never expected. They had imagined many different images of a vampire. Mysterious, evil, terrifying. But looking at them now, they seemed more like a group of workers laboring away for their lives. If not for their pale complexions and the faint glimpses of fangs, classic features of a vampire as described by the church, they would not have dared to confirm whether these truly were vampires. Some vampires were carrying wooden planks. Some were painting walls. Some were mixing mortar. Others were constructing sets. Then there were some vampires gathered together, performing some kind of incomprehensible, exaggerated act. Mr. Zode, this place has truly changed a lot. Mr. Carter did not know what was going through the minds of the extras behind him, he was simply marveling at the changes here. A week ago, this place was just an empty lot. But after 1 week, it already resembled a small street. Isn't this change a bit too drastic? Most of it looked like mere props, just facades resembling buildings. But even so, it was still quite astonishing. He had not expected Zode and his vampires to work so ferociously. Why hadn't he known about this before? If he had known vampires were such capable workers, he should have hired them from the start. His factory's production would have increased several times over. But what he did not know was that the vampires were only impoverished to this day because they refused to work. Even if Mr. Carter offered higher wages, it was difficult to sway these vampires, unless it was under the orders of their leader, the Grand Duke of Blood. The reason these vampires were working so obediently now was simply because of Zode's orders. Mr. Carter, you have arrived. Are these people? These are all extras I recruited from various places. Didn't you say you needed people from all walks of life? And that you wanted them to play themselves? Zode was pleasantly surprised. You really recruited this many people. Mr. Carter, your capabilities are truly impressive. Mr. Carter felt a bit smug. Although the title Grand Duke of Blood was not granted by the state, he was still the leader of a race. Being praised by a race leader felt quite good. Mr. Carter said without modesty, "Ha ha ha, of course. Recruiting these people did take some effort, but the results are good, they are all willing to participate in the filming." Zode looked over the people behind him and nodded. These people fit his requirements for actors quite well. The story of Sherlock Holmes reflects the most ordinary social life. The vast majority of people in the film are grimy and disheveled, emphasizing a sense of realism. For those nobles, watching something like this would be a novel experience, and perhaps it would even have some unexpected effects. Welcome, everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Zode, the director of the magic film, and also the person in charge here. And, I am also a vampire. Zode said to the crowd. After Zode finished speaking, everyone's gaze immediately turned to him. While Zode observed them, these people also began to observe Zode. Unlike the other vampires, Zode possessed more of a human touch. In short, he was not as cold. The image of the other vampires, still working away, had already exceeded their expectations, but that keep-out aura was still immediately apparent. But regarding Zode, if not for his overly pale skin, they might even think Zode was a normal human. Greetings, Lord Zode. Mr. Carter told us we were here to participate in a performance. We would like to ask, what exactly are we performing? A bolder person gathered their courage and took the initiative to ask. Almost none of them had ever seen a stage play, but that did not prevent them from knowing about this form of entertainment. Occasionally, they would hear things from nobles passing by. They would describe stage plays as very beautiful and very elegant, making many of these people yearn for them, hoping that one day they could watch one, even if it meant they could die content afterward. But now, they had not expected to be able to directly participate in a performance like a stage play. It is very simple. I just need you to play yourselves, you only need to perform your original selves. Ah! These people looked at each other. Perform as themselves. That is right. Whatever your original profession is, just try your best to act like that. I know some of you are likely factory workers, so you can act out the appearance of rushing to work. However, this kind of performance requires constant repetition, it is not a one-time thing. My lord, this is a bit. A person scratched their head, unable to describe the feeling for a moment. A bit interesting. They had never really thought about performing as themselves. They had assumed he wanted them to act like nobles. Before coming here, some of them had even started practicing acting like nobles on the carriage, imitating images of nobles they had seen before. But now that they were here, he wanted them to act as themselves instead. Zod turned around, directing everyone's gaze toward the sets that had already been built. Most of these sets were just prop models. Behind those buildings were nothing but support frames to ensure the structures would not collapse. Which of you are vagrants or beggars? My lord, I am. My lord, I am too. Several people called out from the crowd. Very well, you lot, follow me. Zod gestured, and these people followed suit. Zod then led them to the edge of one of the building walls. What were you like when you begged or took a nap before? Probably, like this. A beggar sat down in the corner of the wall and raised a hand, looking somewhat stiff. Usually, when they begged, it was very natural. But suddenly being asked to deliberately act like they were begging made it feel awkward instead. That is okay, although it is still lacking something. Zod offered his critique, then spoke again. What I need you to do is this kind of acting, but of course, it needs to be more natural, so that you blend into this city. Oh, I see. These people responded, seeming to understand but not quite. Realism was what Zod needed. However, because they were just background, slightly deliberate acting could be temporarily overlooked. Their most important role was simply to make it look like a scene happening in reality when the camera was filming. Therefore, Zod's requirements were not very high. Half an hour later, these people finally gradually adapted to the task of performing as themselves. It was not that hard after all. Just by doing this, they could get 30 copper coins and a meal for half a day's work. For the workers at Carter Workshop, it might not be much, but for newsboys, dock porters, and beggars, this was already a very generous income. Boss, these are the recent updates on the Carter Workshop, including the daily frequency of trucks entering and leaving, as well as the employees' shift frequency. Inside the office of Ms. Luna at the Luna Daily, her subordinate was reporting the information just uncovered. After the Luna Daily published content related to Black Hole, some nobles also began to take an interest in Black Hole, and went to the Ruby Theater to watch it. In a way, the Luna Daily had indirectly helped spread Black Hole. Ms. Luna didn't mind this at all. She was willing to publish the content in the Luna Daily simply because Black Hole was truly interesting. She had truly never seen such an interesting recording crystal work before. When recording crystals were popular before, most of the content was very hollow. It was nothing more than scenes recorded randomly by people, or simple recordings of stage plays. If I had the time to watch that, why wouldn't I just go watch a stage play? But Black Hole was different. The format that almost plastered the images onto the viewer's face, along with some incomprehensible yet captivating scene transitions, left a deep impression on Ms. Luna regarding recording crystals. Precisely because of this, Ms. Luna began to take an interest in the person who created Black Hole. However, Ram, the owner of the Ruby Theater, was tight-lipped about the producer of Black Hole. Even when Ms. Luna used her father's status to pressure him, it didn't make Ram yield. The greed in his eyes told Ms. Luna that he was worried someone would snatch away the good business he had finally found. Ram certainly knew that this kind of thing would eventually be exposed, but that didn't stop him from earning a little more before it was. Unable to get information from Ram, Ms. Luna chose another method. And since Carter didn't usually hide his whereabouts, Ms. Luna's employee quickly determined that Carter was the producer of Black Hole. Ms. Luna took the intelligence handed over by her subordinate and began to flip through it carefully. Did you not see anyone other than the employees enter the workshop? The employee shook his head. No, I kept watching the workshop and didn't see anyone other than the employees and their boss enter. Ms. Luna frowned in confusion. Could it really be this Carter who created Black Hole? Finding the workshop that produced Black Hole wasn't difficult, but the moment she found it, Ms. Luna was certain that the creator of Black Hole must be someone else. Carter was merely the one producing the crystals. And what Ms. Luna really wanted to find was the creator of Black Hole. The identity of this creator was what Ms. Luna was most curious about. What kind of person could create such a unique recording crystal work? Oh, it should be called a magic film now. That's the term often circulated among nobles recently. Boss, perhaps that factory owner named Carter really is talented. Is that so? Ms. Luna looked at a solo photo of Carter. She really couldn't see any traits of a creator in Carter. Ms. Luna felt that the person capable of creating such a special work must be a maverick, perhaps even someone out of step with society. Aren't geniuses often said to be reclusive? The person who created Black Hole must be a genius. Ms. Luna was not resigned, so she began to flip through the investigation materials her subordinate had given her again, while waving her hand at the subordinate. All right, there's nothing left for you here. If I need anything, I'll find you later. The employee left, and Ms. Luna continued to flip through the investigation information. And just then, Ms. Luna discovered something strange. In the last few days, the attendance frequency of the workers at the Carter workshop had been decreasing, and there were frequent instances of large groups of employees leaving the workshop together and departing in the same carriage. Since the recording crystals were selling so well, Carter should have been making the employees work overtime. This was very unusual. So Ms. Luna called the employee back in. What else is there, boss? These Carter workshop employees, I want you to follow them and see where they go when they leave during work hours. The employee didn't understand his boss's thought process, but since she was the one paying his salary, he could only obey honestly and return to the Carter workshop. Immediately the next day, the employee brought the news to Ms. Luna. Boss, these people went to a new factory, but the factory chimney there didn't have any smoke coming out, and it didn't look like work was being done inside. The employee took out a map he had hand-drawn and marked the location of that factory. Oh right, there's one more thing. I saw that besides these Carter workshop workers entering and leaving, some guys who looked like beggars or dock workers would frequently enter and exit. Also, cartloads of various miscellaneous materials and some strange equipment were being transported in. And every time these beggars and dock workers came out, I could hear some strange words. What words? Ms. Luna asked while looking at the map. They said that the Lord makes them perform themselves every day, and that this money is so easy to earn. Perform. Ms. Luna keenly sensed the keyword and immediately raised her head to look at the employee. Yes, I'm also a bit curious. Can you really make money just by performing yourself? Is there really such a good thing? Ms. Luna didn't know if such a good thing existed, but she knew she had obtained the information she wanted. In that strange factory, the real creator must be hiding. Performance, isn't that the core of the Black Hole magic film? It's very likely they are creating a second Black Hole there. Ms. Luna immediately became excited. All right, go back to whatever you need to do. I have something to attend to, so I'm leaving. Remember to get the content for tomorrow morning's newspaper done quickly. After saying this, Ms. Luna grabbed her coat and prepared to leave, with the factory marked by the employee as her destination. It was already night, and Ms. Luna took advantage of the cover of darkness to quietly arrive near the factory, cautiously avoiding those entering and leaving the factory. Outside, the entire factory was very bright, but all the doors were tightly closed, looking very mysterious. This made Ms. Luna even more certain that a new black hole was being created here. This noble lady decisively chose to climb onto the factory building to see if she could catch a glimpse of what she wanted. A few minutes later, she finally reached the ventilation window at the top of the factory roof and poked her head inside to look. Then, she saw that the entire factory had been built into small architectural spaces, with all kinds of people moving in and out of them. Besides that, Ms. Luna also saw specialized equipment used for recording crystals. These things were fixed on simple rail devices and moved along with the movement of some figures. Found it indeed. Ms. Luna felt a surge of secret joy. She could be certain that this was the place where the new magic film was being shot. With such a big setup, this looked like it should be a magic film on a much larger scale than Black Hole. At this moment, in front of the recording devices, a man seemed to be beating up the people surrounding him, while several recording devices were aimed at him simultaneously, filming and recording from different angles. Is that a fight? It looks like they are actually fighting. Just then, a bell rang, and immediately Ms. Luna saw a figure standing behind the recording devices, clapping his hands to signal everyone to stop filming. All right everyone. Today's filming is over. Thank you for your efforts, and please keep up the good work tomorrow. The people who were just filming immediately returned to normal. The people who had just been fighting each other stood up, chatting and laughing, and some were even concernedly asking those who had fallen if they were okay, as if the fight just now hadn't existed at all. Ms. Luna blinked her eyes, feeling as if she had discovered a new world. A woman came up to the man's back, opened a wooden box to show it to him, and then spoke. Archduke, these are the recording crystals filmed today. Very good, make sure to preserve them well. These are the most important works for what's to come. Ms. Luna suddenly froze. Archduke. That figure. She knew that, Archduke, was generally a title for a duke or similar status, but usually, those who could become dukes were the heads of a family. Her own father was a duke, and furthermore, the lord of this grand city. Wait, the skin of that woman and this figure looked, it seemed somewhat pale. This clearly didn't look like a normal human. Combined with the title of Archduke, she recalled an ancient piece of trivia. That is, besides being a title for a duke, Archduke is also the title for the leader of a race. That is, the vampire. Combined with the pale skin of those people, it seemed to click all at once. Ms. Luna's eyes widened slightly, a bit incredulous. There is actually vampire involvement here. Wait a second. Could black hole have been created by vampires? Ms. Luna thought of a lot all at once. It felt as if some unexplainable questions now had answers. Why it was so secretive, with the creator's identity never exposed. Logically, with such a genius filming method, someone would have been dying to expose themselves long ago. But vampires clearly didn't want to be too conspicuous. Then, since it's vampires. The lady over there, you seem to have been watching for a long time. It's not very polite to keep peeking like that, you know. Suddenly, Ms. Luna heard the voice of that figure below. Immediately, she saw that the figure was now facing her direction, looking up and staring straight at her. This caused Ms. Luna's pupils to constrict, and her body felt somewhat out of control. She instinctively wanted to retreat. However, she forgot that she was at a height, and so. Ouch! Bang! Ms. Luna fell directly to the ground from a height of 2 or 3 meters, which caused her some pain, and she kept rubbing her bottom. Immediately after, Ms. Luna realized that she shouldn't stay here, and she immediately wanted to sneak away. Before the other party caught her, she should report the situation here to her father. Vampires were suddenly doing some strange filming activities. This seemed to fit the behavior in historical texts about vampires preparing to hold some evil sacrificial rituals. However, just as she was about to leave, Ms. Luna's vision suddenly blurred. A person stood in front of her in the night. In the dark silhouette, she could faintly see glowing eyes, carrying a hint of eeriness and dread. Ms. Luna instinctively wanted to scream, but was quickly suppressed by Zode's next words. This lady, what is your purpose for coming here so late? I accidentally took the wrong turn, then saw the lights on here, and took a curious look. Ms. Luna hurriedly explained. Listening to Ms. Luna's explanation, Zode only felt that her lying skills were really quite poor. Did you hurt yourself falling? If you don't mind, could you come inside and rest for a bit? You don't need to worry, there are no dangerous people here. You look very dangerous. Ms. Luna thought to herself. But she didn't dare say it out loud. Perhaps, she should crush her pendant. Inside that pendant was a super strong communication spell given to her by her father. As long as she crushed it, she could transmit the message to her father, and her father could appear before her immediately to save her. This was also the source of Ms. Luna's confidence in occasionally venturing into some places. Her fingers had already quietly touched the pendant on her chest. But just as her fingertips were about to apply pressure, Zode suddenly spoke. I suggest you'd better not crush that thing right now. Ms. Luna's movements froze. Zode glanced at the pendant on her chest, his tone still very calm. A communication-type magical item, right? And the magical fluctuation inside is very stable, it shouldn't be ordinary goods. Ms. Luna's heart sank immediately. He found out. As expected, vampires' perception of magic and flesh is sharper than that of ordinary people. Perhaps he had known she was peeking from above all along. Thinking of this, Ms. Luna didn't continue to play dumb. Instead, she forced herself to remain calm and looked at Zode. Since you know what this is, you should understand that if something happens to me, Grand City will soon know what happened here. Of course. Zode nodded. That's why I suggested you not crush it right now. Ms. Luna frowned slightly. What do you mean? Zode looked at the brightly lit factory not far away, where one could still hear the sounds of people tidying up props, carrying wooden planks, and the like. There were also a few workers who had just finished their work as extras, collecting their wages for the night and leaving through a side door, chatting and laughing. Zode looked back at Ms. Luna. Because in that case, the people you seek help from will most likely think you are being besieged by a group of vampires. Isn't that the case? You are indeed near a group of vampires right now. Zode admitted it very frankly. But you are not being besieged, you just fell down. Ms. Luna was speechless for a moment. She instinctively rubbed the place that was still aching, her expression still somewhat embarrassed. Zode continued. I know you might have some questions, curious about what we are doing here. I might not be able to explain it clearly in a moment, but if you are willing to go in and take a look, perhaps you will have a different perspective. Why should I trust you? Just based on that pendant of yours, as long as there is danger, you should be able to rely on it to escape at any time. But since you were willing to secretly watch our actions, aren't you curious about what we are doing? Ms. Luna was silent. All right then, I'll go in with you and take a look. Although she said this, Ms. Luna did not loosen her grip on the pendant, ready to send the message at any time. There was no scent of blood inside the factory. All that existed were some constructed house sets and a few vampires who hadn't stopped working yet. Ms. Luna followed behind Zode, but her body remained tense, constantly watching to see if Zode would do anything irrational. Ms. Luna, why are you here? Suddenly, a voice filled with surprise rang out. Ms. Luna turned to look and saw Lucas. You are. Ms. Luna felt the person before her was somewhat familiar. Lucas immediately explained, oh, I'm a minor actor from the Ruby Theater. I've seen you interacting with Boss Ram and several famous actors. I even greeted you in the past, but I assume you wouldn't remember a small fry like me. Ms. Luna was immediately embarrassed. I'm sorry, I really don't have any impression of that. You know each other. Zode looked at the two of them with surprise. He still didn't know who this woman, who had been sneaking a peek outside the factory, was. He had only sensed that he was being watched just now through his keen vampire perception. Director Zode, this is the owner of the Luna Daily. I don't know if you've ever read the Luna Daily. Oh. This time, Zode was truly surprised. Sensing Zode's expression, Ms. Luna seemed to regain some confidence, and she even felt a bit proud inside. Regardless, her Luna Daily was at least quite famous. So, that promotional article for Black Hole was written by you. Promotional. That wasn't a promotion, that was a recommendation, because Black Hole is truly very interesting. Ms. Luna responded with dissatisfaction. She disdained running advertisements in her newspaper, which was one of the reasons why the newspaper's revenue wasn't that substantial. However, she didn't care. Now, Zode began to take Ms. Luna seriously. If it hadn't been for Ms. Luna's article, the efficiency of harvesting the power of worship for Black Hole wouldn't have been so fast. Just a moment ago, Zode had mistaken her for a vampire hunter or some other organization hostile to vampires, but now it seemed that it wasn't a bad thing. In fact, it had turned into a good thing. Zode immediately thought of a new plan, or rather, a plan he had already mapped out but hadn't had the chance to implement yet. At this moment, Lucas seemed to think of something and asked with some anticipation, Ms. Luna, you didn't come to this place wanting to write a recommendation article for Sherlock Holmes, did you? The great detective. Ms. Luna was a bit confused hearing this. She had never heard of such content before. You don't know. This is the filming location for Sherlock Holmes, the same kind of thing as that, Black Hole. Hearing the mention of Black Hole, Ms. Luna immediately perked up, and after a few minutes of understanding, she finally knew what was going on here. This wasn't some sacrificial ground for vampires. If it were, even a hint of the scent of blood would have attracted the encirclement of the church and the Vampire Hunter Association. After all, this was considered a core area of the city. It was just that Ms. Luna had been too nervous earlier and had forgotten about this for a moment. The true purpose of this place was as a filming site for something called Sherlock Holmes. That's how it is, and this vampire, Mr. Zode, is the creator of Sherlock Holmes, and that Black Hole. Ms. Luna immediately took a few extra looks at Zode, and Zode returned the gesture with a gentlemanly bow. To think it was created by a vampire. Ms. Luna muttered to herself. This result was something she hadn't expected. Ms. Luna, I know you might not believe it yet, but that's fine. Whether I am the creator or not isn't important, what's important is the work itself. If you're interested, you can take a look at the newly completed segment of the work. I must say, the work is still under wraps, and so far, you should be the only one to have seen the part that was just adjusted. Okay. Ms. Luna responded almost without thinking. A work just like Black Hole. Wasn't this exactly what she had dreamed of? As for whether it was created by a vampire, that didn't seem so important anymore. Besides, it was she who had preconceived notions about vampires being enemies earlier. But in the last few decades, at least there had been no sign of vampires in any malicious incidents within Grand City. Good. Come, arrange a playback device for our Ms. Luna and let her enjoy our latest work. Zode snapped his fingers at a few busy vampires nearby. Those vampires just glanced at Ms. Luna and then pushed over a projection device from the side. Mr. Zode, could I watch it together too? In the few days I've been performing, I haven't had a chance to see the content I participated in. Of course. I originally intended for everyone to watch it together tomorrow morning so you could see some of the finished product and boost your confidence, but watching it early today is fine too. Zode said while greeting the other busy vampires. At this time, many of the extras had already left. Those remaining were considered the core creative team and members of the vampire clan, so Zode wasn't worried about any leaks. Moreover, this world didn't have any paparazzi. People like Ms. Luna who were a bit strange were, after all, in the minority. But this served as a reminder to Zode that security measures needed to be strengthened. He couldn't wait until paparazzi actually appeared before trying to fix the fence. Soon, most of the factory's lighting gradually extinguished, leaving only a small area of light where everyone was gathered. Immediately after, the projection equipment was in place. As the projection equipment started, a beam of white light shone onto the wall that had been prepared in advance. Ms. Luna stared at the screen without blinking, but at the same time, her grip on the pendant hadn't loosened, clearly still somewhat wary of Zode and the others. Angie nervously watched Ms. Luna, truly worried that this woman might do something irreversible. But Zode just gave a reassuring expression, and immediately, the scenes of Sherlock Holmes appeared on the screen. That was the beginning scene of the film. It was Sherlock Holmes and Watson raiding a sacrificial ritual site with a group of peace officers. Most of the perspective was focused on the protagonist, Sherlock Holmes. Under the cover of night, Sherlock Holmes vaulted over a railing and wall, and plunged into an underground passage. Immediately afterward, a guy holding a lantern, who looked like a guard, was about to walk toward him. At this moment, Sherlock Holmes calmly hid to one side, his eyes clear, and then a voice rang out. Head tilted to the left, indicating the ear is a bit dull. The first move should hit there, the second move should hit the throat. A slow motion shot appeared. When the voice ended, the guard arrived beside Sherlock Holmes, and Sherlock Holmes, just like the voice had said, first struck the ear, then struck the throat. One attack after another, everything was within Sherlock Holmes's expectations, and the man quickly fell to the ground. The rest of the story was the scene of Sherlock Holmes and the peace officers surrounding the sacrificial site, until the final sound of filming rang out, and the scene ended there. The screen went dark, and the lights inside the factory turned back on, but at this moment, no one made a sound. Zode had long since memorized these scenes by heart, so naturally, he wouldn't have much of a reaction. He turned to look around and saw that everyone seemed to have not yet recovered from the scene just now. Some were breathing heavily, and some had pupils that seemed still slightly dilated. As for Ms. Luna, she was still somewhat stunned. That's it. Is it the same as Black Hole? So frustrating. The story seemed quite complete, from breaking into the underground to stop the sacrificial ritual, to the criminals being brought to justice, and then the scene freezing on a newspaper containing the arrest details. But just ending like that, it felt like it was missing so much, even more frustrating than when she watched Black Hole before. No, this is just the first few minutes. This film is over 2 hours long, but I've only edited this much so far. As for the job of editing, Zod hadn't found anyone capable of doing it yet, so he had to do it himself. Fortunately, vampires have abundant energy, and coupled with standing on the shoulders of giants to replicate it, he managed to finish editing these openings 6 minutes in just a few days. This is truly incredible. This was much better than Black Hole. Black Hole was just a one-man show of a greedy person, without any conflict, let alone any contest. But the few minutes of footage before her were very rich in content. Mr. Zod, is this the work you created? Lucas's mouth hadn't closed even now. No, this is something we all created together. You're in the footage too, you know. I know, I just feel, that doesn't look like me acting. Lucas was somewhat incoherent. Standing from a third-person perspective watching his own performance, he didn't have any strange feelings. Instead, he felt as if that wasn't even himself. What was on screen just now was like a real person named Watson, just with an appearance somewhat similar to his own. You underestimate your acting skills too much. Zod said with a smile, then looked at Ms. Luna and asked, Ms. Luna, what do you think? Do you still think we are doing something evil? Ms. Luna suddenly realized, not knowing when she had released her hand that had been gripping the pendant tightly. Wouldn't it be a bit rude to tighten her grip on it again now? Ms. Luna's face flushed red. I must admit one thing. This thing is indeed very interesting, and if it really has a full 2 hours of content as you said, I can't imagine just how interesting it would be. Immediately after, she pressed, so when will this be finished? Soon, in the near future. As for the specific time, perhaps in another half a month. As of now, about 1/3 of the filming had been completed. After completing another third, the remaining third would require location shooting, which might also be a rather troublesome matter. Half a month. Ms. Luna felt somewhat regretful. She had thought she would be able to see the full content tomorrow. Mr. Zod, I want to apologize for my presumption just now. Ms. Luna suddenly became serious. She would not evade facing her mistakes. That's all right. Misunderstandings are very normal. After all, we are vampires, a group of people who are not well received. Zod spread his hands, his tone very relaxed, not taking it too seriously. But when these words were spoken, they made some of the surrounding vampires feel particularly heartbroken. What kind of lives had they been living before? Ms. Luna also keenly sensed the reaction of the surrounding vampires, and immediately felt even more ashamed of her earlier suspicions. Of course, if you still feel embarrassed, you can also help us do something. Ms. Luna hurriedly responded, Mr. Zod, please tell me. Now she was desperately looking for a way to step down. Just do what you did before. Write some articles about this new work and publish them in your Luna Daily. This would count as publicity, and also a recommendation. I wonder if you are willing. Zod had previously seen the recommendation article for Black Hole in the Luna Daily and had thought about finding that newspaper office if there was a chance to proactively propose a collaboration or something. But now that she had actually come to his doorstep, it slightly exceeded Zod's expectations, but it also happened to allow the publicity plan to be brought forward. For this, your Luna Daily can enjoy exclusive access to visit the set here, and you can report on the content here first. However, the specific things reported will need my review. I hope to maintain secrecy while also attracting people's attention. That's absolutely no problem. Ms. Luna agreed almost without thinking. She was even a bit pleasantly surprised. She could come often. There was such a good thing. This, Sherlock Holmes, looked like it had a lot of buzz, and she could see the latest content at any time. Even if Zod hadn't mentioned it, she would have wanted to proactively request the right to visit the set. That's even better. Zod extended his hand, then I wish us a happy cooperation. If you need any more creative details, I am also willing to share some. Ms. Luna also extended her hand and shook Zod's. That couldn't be better, and it will also help me write relevant articles. After speaking, Ms. Luna looked at the projection device again and asked with some hesitation, I have another request. Can I watch the content from just now one more time? Of course. Come, children, play it for our guest one more time. Zod readily agreed. Just a moment ago, he had felt a very clear power of worship released from this woman. Right now, the power of worship harvested from black hole was just gradually decreasing, and using this method of continuously playing the first few minutes to harvest a bit of power of worship wasn't bad either. The clan members were also very enthusiastic. In fact, let alone Ms. Luna, even they wanted to watch the content from just now one more time. There was ultimately a difference between the filming process and the content that had been edited and played back. The edited content had removed all the redundant things, leaving only the essential parts. Lucas and the others had originally stood up from their seats, but upon hearing it would be played again, they immediately sat back down in their seats obediently. The factory lights were extinguished again, and then turned back on a few minutes later. Just like before, everyone who had watched it was silent for quite a while. But this time, Ms. Luna suddenly spoke up. Mr. Zode, I have a question. Go ahead. The music in the footage, it sounds a bit strange. Was it created by someone? I made it myself, but it's just for temporary use. I am currently still looking for a qualified musician. Zode responded awkwardly. In the film, if there was any shortcoming right now, it would be the soundtrack. Zode, who had transmigrated, had a very good memory and could remember many cultural works. But when it came to music, because he hadn't really studied it much, he could only simply hum the melodies he wanted. Therefore, Zode had planned to find a suitable composer before, but it hadn't been put on the agenda yet. Ms. Luna suddenly said, do you need someone familiar with music? If so, may I make a recommendation? A movie, aside from outstanding performances and spectacular scenes, also has something known to be very important. That is the soundtrack. During a battle, a rhythm with dense drumbeats can elevate the immersion of the viewing experience by another level. When a theme song starts playing, it can make people immediately feel a certain resonance with a movie. Just like, See You Again, in Fast and Furious 7. The two male leads sit in their respective cars and drive off on diverging roads, leaving behind a classic scene that is both regrettable and unforgettable. And the moment the melody of The Sun Also Rises, from Let the Bullets Fly, plays, one's entire soul seems to surge with passion along with it. In the movie, Sherlock Holmes, the soundtrack by top composer Hans Zimmer also played an indispensable role. The sudden stops and the rhythm that shifts between forte and piano seem just like the erratic thinking of Sherlock Holmes, highlighting a sense of uniqueness. Coupled with the actors' outstanding performances and director Guy Ritchie's unique filming techniques, it left a very deep impression on Zode, which also led Zode to later watch many of Guy Ritchie's other movies. However, although Zode possesses an excellent memory and can remember every plot point of the movies he has seen, he lacks a bit of musical talent and cannot perfectly reproduce the soundtracks from his memory. And even if he does reproduce them, it always seems to lack that feeling of soul. Perhaps this is the difference between a true musical genius and an ordinary person. And Ms. Luna's words just now happened to serve as a reminder for him. Julian Homan, he is my music teacher and also a professor at the Royal Conservatory of Music. Ms. Luna took a photo out of her handbag and handed it to Zode. Is the opening this top tier? Zode said while taking the photo. The photo shows a thin, tall old man who looks like a standard artist with long hair, wearing a monocle, with an expression that is hard to tell if it is serious or indifferent. This appearance makes him look like an expert at first glance. Then where is this master? Ms. Luna said, he should be at the Royal Conservatory of Music right now, over in the royal capital. Ms. Luna, as far as I know, it would take at least a month to get from here to the royal capital and back, right? If using a griffin, it would still take at least 7 days, and an old man like that probably couldn't handle riding something like a griffin. Ms. Luna blinked her eyes. Are you in a hurry? Zode nodded. I certainly hope the work can be released as soon as possible, so I'm afraid by the time we summon this master, our magic film will have already been released. In Zode's estimation, all production could be completed in about half a month. Therefore, he is afraid he won't be able to use this master's soundtrack. But there will be opportunities for collaboration in the future. After all, he still has many ideas for filming magic films. It's just unclear if this master, who looks very impressive, would be willing to work as a soundtrack composer. Ms. Luna clearly didn't expect Zode to be in such a hurry. It is mainly because the vampire clan has not fully recovered, it has only suppressed the effects brought by the poisoned blood for now. To truly eradicate it, either consume large amounts of pure plasma. According to the current price of plasma on the black market, it probably wouldn't be possible without thousands of gold coins. Or, harvest a large amount of power of worship. At the very least, he needs to harvest a portion to continue suppressing the poisoned blood of his clansmen, so as to give the subsequent survival of the clan a breather. Therefore, Zod must race against time. Zod waved his hand at this time and said, "Forget it, it doesn't matter if there isn't a good master, a few musicians who can cooperate with me will do. After all, I don't need to compose right now, just reproduce the soundtrack I've conceived. No need to compose. Then I can also think of a way. Give me a few days, okay?" Zod replied indifferently, "Fine, it doesn't matter if you don't find anyone, this won't affect the cooperation we've discussed. If he really can't find anyone in the end, there are still people from the Ruby Theater who can help. It's just that is the last resort." That evening, Ms. Luna left the factory with some of the photos that had been taken. Immediately the next morning, the latest Luna Daily featured an article about the new magic film. The mysterious creator of Black Hole appears again, he is about to create a new work. And what Ms. Luna didn't expect was, the nobles in the city now seem very sensitive to the term black hole. As long as something related to black hole appears, they will all flock to it. The Luna Daily, which had been somewhat ignored that day, surprisingly became rare and in high demand. But Ms. Luna didn't care about this, she was more concerned about the request for a soundtrack composer that Zod had made. Having seen the opening plot of Sherlock Holmes, Ms. Luna seemed to have developed some kind of obsessive-compulsive disorder. If that soundtrack couldn't be perfect, it seemed as if the entire work wouldn't be perfect either. This is something Ms. Luna absolutely would not allow. Such a perfect work, if it had flaws just because of a soundtrack, would be too much of a pity. She had only just managed to find something sufficiently interesting after great difficulty. So on the evening of the second day, Ms. Luna personally brought 3 or 4 musicians from the city that she had found through friends or her own connections. Then, as expected, these musicians were a bit worried when they heard they would be working for a vampire. But after watching the opening of Sherlock Holmes, just like her, they all inevitably behaved in the same way. That is, they were all willing to go through fire and water for this work. Perhaps this is a certain intuition of being a creator. After a new cultural phenomenon is born, they can most clearly perceive the influence it might bring. And having the opportunity to become participants in such a work, they will also receive unimaginable honors in the future. They all chose to dive into work that same day, and when Zod said he would add their names to the credits, these musicians unanimously chose to work without any remuneration. Zod, who had already spent his funds, was happy with this. Moreover, the true leader was still him. Zod just hoped to have a few musicians who could add some feeling of soul based on the melody and rhythm he provided, without needing drastic adjustments to the soundtrack. At least Zod didn't think these people could surpass the original composer Hans Zimmer, so standing on the shoulders of predecessors was the wisest choice. At this point, there was no longer any need to worry about the soundtrack, the actors had been gathered, and the Ruby Theater had erected a huge banner at the entrance, waiting for the day Sherlock Holmes would be released. Thus, completing the filming was just a matter of time. Time also passed quickly again, and before one knew it, another week of filming had passed. Magic is truly a convenient thing. On the set of Sherlock Holmes, Zod was busily conjuring up tiny fireworks at his fingertips with great interest. As time passed, Zod's control over his body became increasingly strong. Coupled with the digestion of the power of worship, a portion was converted into magic power within his body, allowing this Grand Duke of Blood to once again possess a certain level of combat capability. Zod then took advantage of the gaps in filming to practice magic. Various conventional types of magic were not a problem for the Grand Duke of Blood, he only needed to recall them slightly from his memory to easily reproduce them. As for some forbidden magic, it required much greater magic power to support, and some even required special rituals to drive. However, Zod was not interested in these. He had no intention of overthrowing the world. When he first arrived in this world, his initial thought was just to survive, to prevent his race from going extinct, so that he himself could continue to live well. But now, Zod began to have some new ideas. What kind of chemical reaction would it produce to bring more culture from his past life to this world? Would the people of this world get hooked because of it? As for the massive power of worship they would contribute after getting hooked, Zod had no intention of using it for anything bad. Instead, he felt perhaps he could better create various cultural works, or even some other fun things. Snap. Cling clang tilde. Following Zod's silent incantation, a brilliant firework appeared at his fingertips once again. Immediately after, the firework quickly transformed into a magic music box and began to automatically emit a familiar melody. Grand Duke, what are you doing? Little Triss discovered Zod's actions in the corner, so she curiously leaned over, and then saw the music box emerging from Zod's fingertips. The music box looked very delicate, and there was a small doll on it, dancing along with the music played by the music box. It looked very interesting. Triss wanted to reach out and touch it, but she couldn't feel any solid entity. I'm molding illusion magic, thinking that with this thing, perhaps I can save a lot of trouble during filming. As Zod's control over the illusion became more refined, more complex patterns began to appear on this virtual music box. However, when Zod wanted to make the music box larger, the illusion magic burst with a bang like an overinflated balloon and then quietly vanished. This gave Triss a fright, but she still felt it was very novel and kept blinking her eyes. Grand Duke, this seems very interesting. It's very interesting, right? I think so too, it's just a pity that this thing can't be made too big yet. Zod shook his head with slight regret. Currently, he could only manage to maintain a piece of illusion magic at the size of a palm. Once it became larger, the magic power would break due to instability. To create larger illusions, besides refined magic control, it was estimated that he would also need a sufficiently massive supply of magic power. Right now, the magic power inside his body was still not enough. It seems he still needed more power of worship. Zod suddenly felt a bit anxious again. Imagine if in the future, various famous movies could all use illusions to assist in filming. Wouldn't that be equivalent to all kinds of free green screen special effects? Then at that time, there would be absolutely no need to consider filming on location. If he pushed it to the limit, he could directly use illusions to create an entire city to complete the filming of the entire magical film. Just thinking about it was very exciting. Triss said happily at this moment, Grand Duke, can you conjure it up again? That melody was so nice to listen to, I want to hear it again. Triss, don't be naughty. The Grand Duke has already been very tired after a busy day, don't disturb him. Angel walked over and wanted to pull Triss to the side. In terms of age, Triss should actually be considered an adult. But the long lifespan of vampires made them look like they changed very slowly. Plus, because vampires had not interacted with the outside world for a very long time in the past, Triss still had the mindset of a child. This made Angel feel slightly helpless. It's okay, since Triss likes watching, I'll just mold another one for her. Zod said nonchalantly, then casually molded another music box again. At the same time, following Zod's mental adjustment, the image of the music box changed, and the music inside also changed. What a beautiful melody. Not far away, several musicians couldn't help but exclaim. Recently, they had cooperated with Zod to complete most of the scoring work. Their final conclusion was that Zod was also a genius. He was familiar with all sorts of interesting ways to use melodies. But Zod knew what was going on with himself, otherwise, he wouldn't have actively sought out musicians to assist him with the scoring. Triss laughed happily, and as Zod kept adjusting the music of the music box, she would let out all kinds of surprised laughter. And just at this moment, it seemed as if Zod had thought of something. The illusion in his hands began to undergo slight changes. His magic power still couldn't maintain the illusion in too large a form. So, was there anything interesting that didn't need a very large form? Following Zod's mental adjustment, an image that Zod was extremely familiar with gradually appeared. It was the image of a short, chubby guy, wearing overalls, with a red hat on his head, and a big nose. Super Mario. This was one of the most classic images of the video game era. Under the effect of the illusion, it directly presented a 3D image. However, 3D consumed a bit too much magic power right now. So Zod closed his eyes and began to adjust his magic power again, and subsequently, that 3D Mario image turned into a flat 2D one. Then, this 2D character was gently placed on the tabletop by Zod, and he proceeded to draw out wisps of magic threads, constructing several brand new shapes above the magic threads. Up, down, left, right. A, B. Buttons appeared one by one in front of Zod. Zod stared at those few buttons, his eyes suddenly becoming a bit strange. If it were just a pure illusion, it could only be watched. But what if this illusion could react according to external input? He reached out and gently pressed the magic button for right. The small doll on the table immediately moved its short legs and clumsily ran 2 steps to the right. Triss's eyes lit up instantly, looking even happier than before. Grand Duke, Grand Duke. It moved. This little person is walking. Wasn't that music box just now also moving? That's not the same. Triss immediately retorted, pointing at the hand Zod had just used to press the button. Just now it was only making sound, and the little person on that little box was just dancing on its own. Now, aren't you, Grand Duke, making it move? Zod pressed the up button again. Mario jumped in place, but it seemed because the magic construction was still unstable, it splatted and fell into a blur of light spots. Triss immediately burst into laughter, but immediately looked expectantly at the buttons Zod had conjured with the illusion. Grand Duke, so fun. Can I press the 2? Zod, however, did not laugh. He looked at the recondensing Mario, his eyes getting brighter and brighter. Triss might just find it interesting, but in Zod's eyes, it was something completely different and familiar. Isn't this just a video game? On the flat tabletop, Triss happily smiled as she pressed the illusionary buttons and patterns constructed from magic. In Zod's eyes, creating this thing was actually quite simple. As long as one was proficient in illusion magic, individually marked each illusion, and then input commands, they could make the creations of the illusion respond to button presses. It was just like pre-written code scripts. Except illusion magic skipped the coding step entirely. As long as the button commands were set within the illusion, it could run directly. As a game developer in his past life, Zod was all too familiar with this process. Magic really is a convenient thing. Is there anything special about this? Angie, who was standing to the side, looked at the happy Triss, unable to understand what there was to be so glad about. In a way, this was similar to controlling a puppet. It was just that one used magic to directly control a physical puppet, while the other controlled a virtual illusion. But Triss seemed to be thoroughly enjoying herself. Angie, you don't understand yet. Right now, this thing doesn't look like much, but the fun of it is beyond imagination. Zod had long been thinking about how to port games over. During this time, he had already tried to program magic, converting it into a binary programming system. But just as Zod had expected, the binary principles of Earth could not be directly replicated, mainly because the magic consumption was far too immense. Using magic runes to convert into code and then program, even just making a very simple, Hello World program, almost completely drained Zod of his magic. This thing was simply not meant for normal people. Based on the 10-tier system for spellcasters in this world, Zod's body was at least tier 3, which was already considered mid to high tier. Thus, Zod immediately ruled out the path of magic programming. Later, as the filming of Sherlock Holmes entered a critical phase, Zod temporarily set this matter aside. He planned to wait until the official release, when he would have some free time and a greater harvest of power of worship, to properly study and create video games. He just hadn't expected that while trying to figure out some illusion magic to facilitate filming, he would actually find a path for game development. However, Zod couldn't help but complain about illusion magic itself. This thing was hardly like programming, it was more like some metaphysical power of, I think. If, I think, you should run to the right, then you run to the right when the button is pressed. If, I think, you throw a small fireball, then pressing the button must send a fireball flying into someone's face. Puff tilde. As Zod stopped channeling his magic, the bouncing little figure in front of the happily playing Triss vanished instantly. Zode then patted Triss on the head. Alright, my magic is limited, so we can only play for this long today. Okay, Triss nodded obediently, though she was still a bit reluctant to stop. Zode hadn't yet figured out how he would create games in the future. Draining his own magic like this was definitely not a long-term solution, so he probably needed to create a type of magical device. In other words, he had to first cobble together a game console in this world. Zode sighed with emotion. He hadn't expected that after coming to this world, he would still have to find a way to become an all-rounder. But in the early days of video games in his past life, game developers themselves were also skilled at creating game consoles, each of them a jack of all trades. It wasn't until games became increasingly complex later on that the division of labor in game development gradually emerged. Besides, creating both the game console and the games in this world actually felt pretty exciting when he thought about it. Angie quietly pondered the fun Zode had mentioned. However, she still failed to see what fun there could be in such simple illusionary interactions. Admittedly, that jumping little figure did look quite cute. But it just seemed like a child's toy. But this contemplation was quickly overshadowed by new tasks, and Zode became so busy that his feet barely touched the ground. It wasn't until the day's filming ended and the actors left one after another that Zode finally managed to find a brief moment of respite. Grand Duke, you must be very tired. Let's rest early tonight, tomorrow's work will likely be very heavy as well. Angie proactively walked over, showing a look of concern. She deeply admired the vampire leader in front of her, who was also an ancestor-level figure to her. If the previous mess had been left to other vampires, they would have probably collapsed long ago. Now, however, they seemed to have found life in a dead end, giving the vampires room to survive once more. I'm fine. I'm actually quite enjoying myself, Zode replied, full of energy. People always say that good cultural works secrete dopamine, making people excited and hooked. Zode felt that he had the same feeling when creating. Right now, he was a bit hooked. Although today's filming was over, he still had another interesting thing that wasn't finished yet. Zode's palm conjured a new illusion once more, overlaying it onto the flat tabletop. Immediately after, a circular button-like element appeared at the bottom of the screen. This was the joystick. However, right now it was still like rubbing glass on a mobile phone, lacking a bit of tactile feedback. But for now, he had to make do with it. Grand Duke, are you creating that thing again? Angie noticed Zode's movements and couldn't help but feel a bit helpless. The current Grand Duke was really pushing himself too hard. She didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Zode began to focus again, and under the supply of his magic, a brand new image quickly appeared on the flat tabletop. First was a flat pixel character. This was the method that consumed the least magic at the moment. Next, a flat background appeared behind the pixel character. After a simple construction, scenes resembling forests, libraries, altars, and so on were presented one after another. Immediately after, Zode lifted his fingertip, and numerous pixel creatures appeared around the central character on the flat surface. Those creatures looked like a jumbled mess, but one could distinguish that they were supposed to be some kind of monsters. Yeah, that's about it. For now, I can only do this much. Zode nodded in satisfaction as he looked at his results. Seeing this, Angie played along and asked, "My lord, what is this?" Oh, it's called Vampire Survivors. It's a game. Do you want to try it? Vampire Survivors. Zode had a deep impression of this game. It could be called a classic model among indie games. Using the simplest and most direct logic, it allowed characters to continuously acquire various abilities and weapons as they leveled up and explored, ultimately creating a highly addictive gameplay style through various random builds. Later, this even became a dedicated genre, commonly known as survivor-like. Hearing Zode's active invitation, Angie felt too embarrassed to refuse outright, so she could only nod gently and say, "Alright then, I'll give it a try." However, with this one try, an entire night passed. Angel had never imagined in her life that she would use up all her magical reserves to maintain an illusion magic. And this illusion magic was called Vampire Survivors. After Zode created this game through illusion magic, he discovered that other people playing only needed to provide continuous magic to maintain it, without needing to create this illusion magic from scratch. So, creating a game himself and then letting others who play it provide the source of magic seemed like a pretty good path. But this was only suitable for those who possessed spellcasting abilities. For those without spellcasting abilities, they would probably have to rely on finding a way to create a game console with a magical energy supply. Angel, is this fun? Early in the morning, Zode looked at Angel and asked a question that felt like a soul-searching interrogation. Ah, Archduke, I'm sorry, I lost my composure. Hearing Zode's question, Angel realized that she seemed to have been playing for the entire night. By now, her magic was depleted, and her body had started to send out warning signals. Zode pressed his hand on Angel's shoulder, injecting a stream of magic into her body, which finally made her feel a little better. He consoled her like someone who had been through it before. It's fine, it's very normal for you to react this way. Zode remembered that he had the same reaction when he first played Vampire Survivors. The first time he saw this game, it was already the era when 3A masterpieces were rampant on Earth. Zode's first impression at the time was, what on earth is this? And it actually has rave reviews on Steam. I've got to at least try it out. Then he played it continuously for several days, even forgetting to eat and sleep. It was truly addictive. So when Zode wanted to create a game in this world, this was the first one that came to mind. Related to vampires, the original story setting was about a group of vampire hunters adventuring in a vampire's castle. But it only needed a slight modification to change it into a group of vampires struggling to survive under the siege of vampire hunters and the church. It was just a matter of changing the imagery, which was very easy. Angel still felt a bit ashamed. She had never been so obsessed with something before. But, this thing seemed to have a kind of magic. It was different from watching a magic film. Magic films seemed to offer a kind of immersive feeling where you dove into the whole thing. But this thing felt like you were the protagonist yourself. Archduke, can I play too? Triss watched from the side with eager eyes, looking very longing. This thing looked much more interesting than those little figures that just jumped around earlier. Sorry, Triss, Angel and I probably don't have that much time right now, and your own magic reserves aren't enough to play it alone, but I don't think it will be long before you can play it without limits. Really? Triss asked, blinking her eyes. Of course it's true. When has your Archduke ever lied to you? Zode ruffled Triss's hair, then turned to look at the actors arriving at the factory one after another in the morning. Then he clapped his hands and greeted everyone. Alright everyone, today's filming work is still very busy, but we are about to finish all the work, so please put in a little more effort. After more than a week, the main plot of Sherlock Holmes had completely wrapped up. The location shooting was also basically finished under the arrangements of Carter and Ms. Luna. What remained were some shots that needed to be reshot. Zode estimated that if things went smoothly today, it could all be completed. At this moment, it wasn't just the actors entering through the factory door, but also Carter, who had slight dark circles under his eyes. As soon as he entered, Carter searched for Zode's figure and then quickly came before Zode, asking rather anxiously, Mr. Zode, who is the person behind that woman, Irene? They look so mysterious. Carter had just finished reading the entire script for Sherlock Holmes. Originally, he wanted to wait until the end to enjoy it when the magic film was released. This was just like what Zode said, to watch it with a sense of anticipation. But he really couldn't help it. After holding back for several days, he finally took the initiative to ask Zode for the full script of the film and read it all in one go. The final plot of Sherlock Holmes was naturally a happy ending. The villain ultimately died due to their own cleverness backfiring. And Sherlock Holmes, as a vampire, gained the recognition of the city's people, and he and Watson accepted the commendation from the royal family together. However, many unsolved mysteries were buried throughout the story. For example, the character, Irene, who could be considered the heroine. Zode found a female vampire who was good at acting to play this role. To portray a seductive and cunning female character, the stage actors of this world probably didn't have that ability yet. This, on the contrary, was very suitable for vampires who were naturally good at disguise and deception. And this, Irene, character, while cooperating with the protagonist Sherlock Holmes, also seemed to be working for another big shot, belonging to an ambiguous, both good and evil, character type. In the story, Sherlock Holmes had several brief confrontations with her, with both sides winning and losing. And in the process of these back and forth confrontations, the two sides actually formed a strange kind of tacit understanding and harmony. By the time Carter reached the end, an inexplicable feeling had arisen within him. It felt like the two of them were just one thin layer of paper away from being together. However, in the end, they didn't get together, which was really a pity. That was why he took the initiative to find Zode, wanting to get an answer. This. I intended to present it in the later stories, because this time I didn't just want to produce one story, I want to produce at least two. Oh. There are actually two stories. That's great. Carter showed a smile, looking a bit silly, just like the face of a fool who saw hope for a favorite couple to get together. Zode could be considered to have dangled a carrot in front of this partner. With this carrot, it was estimated that his subsequent work would be more enthusiastic. He hadn't even settled the matter of the game console yet. But Carter had a factory. It would be a real pity not to utilize it. Upon hearing Zode's assurance, Carter's spirits were indeed lifted, and even the dark circles under his eyes seemed to fade a little. Mr. Zode, please make sure to let me see the second part. No problem, please look forward to it. Zode smiled, then looked at the filming location that was already prepared. Sherlock Holmes and Watson walked out of the hall where they had received their honors, and outside were the fog-filled streets. He didn't look back, nor did he accept the applause of the nobles, he just reached out to lower the brim of his hat, as if he had caught the scent of a new case again. Vic stood at the end of the set, with Lucas following behind him. The recording crystal slid slowly. The musician gently struck the first bass note. Zode raised his hand. Everyone, take your positions. Everyone immediately quieted down. Final shot. Action. That's the end of part 2. Part 3 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and support our channel for more stories.